Ever since discovering it way back in 2023, I have been obsessed with murder drones, which may be a shock as most of you probably know me for being a FNAF person. But to my friends and some of you who've been paying close attention, you will know that I absolutely love this show. From the characters to the world building, the action and animation, the story and overall style, it has kept me captivated throughout all 8 of its episodes and is honestly the main reason why I got into watching so many other indie animated shows. However, for a while, I had only watched through all of Murder Drones a single time, which in retrospect is kind of funny since it was all I could think about for a while alongside FNAF. I had been wanting to rewatch it for a while, but between juggling school at the time, making YouTube videos, and traveling, I simply didn't have the time to sit down and watch it all in one sitting. That was until very recently. After months, I had finally sat down, pulled up Glitch's playlist of the show, got in a call with a friend who also wanted to watch it with me again, and we did just that. I think it's safe to say that's when the rose-tinted glasses I had once worn completely shattered into a million pieces. Now don't get me wrong, I still love Murder Drones, but from the plot holes to its writing, lack of explanations or expansions on ideas, and just straight up not knowing what the fuck is going on, it ignited this sort of fire within me to make a video about this show, giving all of my praises and problems I have with it. And trust me, I have a lot of problems with this show. But before I go into any of them, I need to lay some grounds for what this video is actually about. This video is going to be sort of a combination of a recap, explanation/analysis, and criticism of the entire show combined into one. To which I will have chapters for the video, so if you don't want to watch the insanely long recap, you don't have to. But I would appreciate it if you did. Some of the points I will make will be based on my opinion, and you are able to freely disagree with anything I have to say, and if you do, you are also welcome to respectfully say so in the comments below, and I'd be willing to have a conversation about it. It also goes without saying that I highly recommend you watch the actual show before this video, because no matter how much I discuss and explain it, it will never be just watching it outright. And if you haven't done so before, you are in for a ride. A very confusing and weird ride, but a ride nonetheless. It's less than 3 hours for all 8 episodes, and you won't regret it. Just watch it and make sure to come back to this video. One last thing before I do actually go ahead and cover the show, I want to explain how I'll be formatting this video, just so you, the viewer, aren't confused about why I'm bringing up what at certain times. I'll be going through the episodes in chronological order and talk about what happens in the episode, and at the same time, I'll be giving my thoughts on what's going on. I will also be leaving out certain information if it has not yet appeared in the show. So if I'm talking about specific plot devices and you're wondering, oh, why isn't Kip also bringing up blank? Then that's why. After recapping the entire show, I'll provide an explanation of the show itself, and then my actual thoughts on why I find Murder Drones so great yet so lacking. And when I am talking about certain topics, I will put more text on the screen to be more specific about what I'm talking about. So if you're listening to this video as background noise when you're playing a video game or doing art, I know you're out there, and you happen to hear something that makes you second guess, rewatch that segment and see if I have any further explanations on the screen. And to repeat once again, these are my opinions, so don't take it personally. With all of that being said, this is my video about Murder Drones, a disappointing masterpiece. Our story first begins with an exposition narrated by our main character, Uzi Dorman, or simply known as Uzi. She explains that she is a worker drone, a type of robot which was created by a mega corporation known as JC Jensen, and this mega corporation also happens to own the exact planet they're currently on, called Copper 9. And the sole purpose of the worker drones is to collect resources for the humans. However, through the fault of their own, the planet's core ended up exploding one way or another, and all human life was wiped from the planet and rendered completely inhospitable. To which the worker drones simply started their own society, getting married, having kids, all of that jazz. Which, before you ask how the fuck that works, I'll explain that later. When JC Jensen found out about this runaway robot situation, however, they got to work by sending another type of drone to the planet, simply called disassembly drones, whereas the workers nicknamed them murder drones. Guys, look, it's the name of the show, holy shit! And that's the end of the exposition. Alright, so far what we know is that there was an Earth-like planet that was owned by this JC Jensen company for resource mining, it blew up, and then the robots on that planet started doing what they wanted. There are 2 types of drones that we know exist, which are the worker and disassembly drones, and the entire purpose of the disassembly drones is to murder the workers. And god damn have they been killing it. Quite literally. I also forgot to mention the main reason they do this, besides the fact that JC Jensen told them to, is because they need to drink the oil that's inside the worker drones' bodies, because if they don't, that'll cause them to overheat and presumably die. I'm sure this detail will still be important to the plot later on. The whole flashback is revealed to be a slideshow that Uzi is presenting in school, which also reveals how the worker drones have been keeping safe, and that's by staying behind 3 big doors. Despite them being really effective, Uzi really hates the fact that everyone is confined to being inside basically forever, so her solution to this is is...
This sick as hell railgun!
So not the vibe.
Now, besides the fact that it's a gun in a classroom, I don't know why the hell nobody fucks with this idea. I mean, that is a sick as hell railgun. Or at least that's what I would say if it actually worked, because it blows up. Womp womp. In the school's office where Uzi is bandaged up and her railgun is smoking, we are introduced to a few of the side characters, but we only end up knowing the name of one for now, Thad, who also reveals to us, the audience, who Uzi's dad is, that being Con Dorman, the one who created the 3 doors I previously mentioned, and it's pretty clear that Uzi doesn't exactly have the best relationship with him. Her plan to change this, however, is to earn her dad's respect by making the railgun actually work to, quote, save the world. Hey Uzi, it might be a bit too late for that. However, to make the railgun work, she needs to retrieve a part from the disassembly drone's hideout spot, which, when you think about it, raises the question, how does she know that specific part is at that spot? And to answer that question, I don't know. One thing that really irritates me about this show is the fact that there are a lot of scenarios where a character will do something for a certain reason, but it just isn't explained what that reason is. And if there is an explanation, it ends up being hidden to the point that only the most diehard fans will know, which is not exactly the greatest thing to do when you want to get people into the show. Another thing that personally bothers me a little bit, but not a whole lot, is the humor, which is obviously gonna be subjective, but to me, it just isn't my thing most of the time. It gives off the same vibe as 2017 Tumblr era / millennial humor, which I absolutely cannot stand.
Crippling daddy issues, hilarious. What are you in for? Testosterone too hard?
That can happen? Awesome.
I will give them credit where it's due though. This show has a lot of visual gags that land pretty well, which I think is funny in its own right. And the fact they end up being funnier than a lot of the told jokes sometimes. Speaking of which, when Uzi goes out to sneak out of the base, she steals the key from her dad, and you can see that this guy is really obsessed with doors, even more so than Uzi herself. Strangely enough, there's also a family photo of Uzi's family, however, her mom is covered up for whatever reason. As Uzi goes to sneak out of the base, she's confronted by Khan himself and gives the excuse of wanting to check on the exterior door mechanisms and join the WDF, or Worker Defense Force, which surprisingly works. But before she's let go, Khan gives her a wrench that apparently he used to mercy kill her mom.
Neat. Therapy's fun.
As she exits the door, we get to see more of how absolutely fucked up the planet truly is, and also gives us a pretty rough estimate on where Copper 9 is actually located, since we can see Saturn at a pretty close distance, all things considered. I love how the environment looks here, and it really reminds me a lot of The Last of Us 2. Post-apocalyptic scenes like this just scratch an itch in my brain that I can't describe. I mean, come on, this just looks beautiful. Uzi does eventually find the part she needs, but a disassembly drone returns to the landing pod and attacks her, stabbing her in the hand, but she does win the fight after shooting him with the railgun. Oh my god, that is not a fucking railgun, that is a laser cannon. Even after evaporating the drone's head, he simply regenerates it, and in order to fight back, Uzi just smacks him with an arm. Okay, this is off topic, but oh my god, the animation here looks so fucking bad. I'm so glad they stopped using mocap in the later episodes. This looks like some shit from Xavier Renegade Angel.
Doc, your son showed me his private places, and now I'm going to show them to you.
Either way, this is where we are now formally introduced to one of our main characters, serial designation N, or simply N. And due to having his shit literally blown off 5 seconds ago, he has a malfunction and mistakes Uzi for being a disassembly drone. Uzi tries to back out of the conversation, but N notices her hand and suggests she just pop it in her mouth, because apparently the disassembly drone's saliva will neutralize the acid in their tails, which I forgot to mention is called nanite acid and is the same thing that killed Uzi's mom. Uzi then suggests going inside the landing pod and makes use of N's saliva, which... yeah, I don't know how to word that any better. And then introduces us to 2 more important characters, Serial Designation V and Serial Designation J, both of whom aren't exactly very fond of N. While he's talking about the two, however, this is when Uzi realizes the landing pod they're in is actually a spaceship and suggests the idea of working together with the worker drones to fix it and take revenge on the humans that sent them there, saying that the company will probably just dispose of him and the other disassembly drones once every worker is dead. Oh yeah, this is also where it's revealed that the disassembly drones need oil to cool down, but I already mentioned that, so whatever. J and V eventually do return from their hunt. Uzi runs away somehow despite the two literally being inside the corpse spire, and then N realizes that the drone he just talked to was actually a worker, so he chases Uzi down. Uzi isn't quick enough to the base, and N is able to get past the first door and kill the workers that were stationed there. Khan comes back to see the dead workers and Uzi standing there, which is when N swoops in between the two. When Uzi ups her railgun on N and tells Khan to get down, he literally just doesn't for some reason, which results in N stabbing her with his wing and pinning her against the wall. Uzi tells her dad to use the railgun and shoot, but he just doesn't and closes the door on her. her, which is fucking cold. This is the first episode, by the way, and this guy has already proven himself to be a huge bum. This is low tier god level behavior, and is pretty surprised witnessing this happen, but snaps out of it when Jay and V arrive, so he tosses Uzi aside to prevent her from being killed, to which they congratulate him for being useful for once. V flies off to kill the others, and before Jay can follow, and asks her questions about who sent them and what will happen to them once all the workers are dead, to which she stabs him with the virus, saying all workers are corrupted, and it seems he became corrupted too. When Jay flies off, Uzi berates N for having an admittedly pretty lame side switch moment. Upon attempting to pursue V and Jay, she realizes she can't reach the vent and removes the virus from N so he can help her. V and Jay locate the evacuation spot for the workers, and Thad tries to rally the WDF to, you know, defend. But these motherfuckers are fake demons and don't do anything until Uzi and N appear and fight the two themselves. I have no idea why Jay just stands there waiting for the pen to hit her, but whatever. The four have an epic fight scene, which I'm not going to show all of because it's like 2 minutes long. But in the end, Jay gets evaporated by Uzi's railgun and N is able to capture V. Uzi confronts Khan for being a pussy and tosses back the wrench he gave her. And then the three just fly out and bust through the roof, which like, I don't know why the disassembly drones didn't do that way before, but whatever. The episode then ends with Uzi sitting on a broken car and then standing inside the worker corpse fire saying he would join her but the sunlight would kill him, which I'm assuming that means it would cause him to overheat or something. As she is monologuing, a weird glitch happens with her eyes and then we zoom out from Copper 9 and see 3 other spaceships flying to it. While there are some plot holes here and there and the animation really not being the best, this was a very solid start to the series and really does get the viewer interested in the story that is being set up here. But the thing that personally really dragged me into the show was the characters. Now I know I said before that I really didn't like the humor of the show that much, but I would be lying if I didn't say it was sort of charming. And not just that, but also pretty fitting characterization, especially for Uzi, who is essentially the weird kid out of everyone in her class and just in general. I mean, she does call herself the angsty teen with daddy issues who watches a bunch of pirated anime. She is meant to be that kind of person. And you know what? I think that's cool. But do you know what isn't cool? The next episode of the show taking over a fucking year to release. Oh my god. I think now is a good time to tell you guys that this show doesn't exactly go in chronological order sometimes, as we start with a flashback and see N with worker drone proportions, dressed as a butler, and serving humans in a quite lavish mansion. N runs into V, who is also a worker, and both of them spill their items, and in the middle of picking them up, Jay barges in and kicks N for whatever reason, who then suddenly gives her attention to someone named Tessa. Standing behind her is a new face, one we don't know the name of yet, but looks similar to the trio. Slight spoiler, these two are going to become very important to the story eventually. The flashback ended up actually being a dream N was having, and he wakes up to Uzi's voice. While looking at a mirror, a strange symbol appears in the place of her eye and for some reason completely cracks it. V comments on it and Uzi is quick to put the blame on her, which is when N comes in and Uzi diverts her attention on him and asks if he realized the hat he was wearing was a pilot hat. And what do you know? He didn't know he was the pilot. He then asks Uzi if the plan to kill all humans is morally correct. This is when Uzi starts to connect the information we have right now. She argues it's justified since they basically sent N and his group to Copper 9 without any further communication and mess with their memories. And the reason I don't say completely deleted is that there is some amount of evidence that they are sort of intact. V then butts in and says that her story doesn't make any sense, and it's pretty convenient that her kind is the one that's innocent in it. Which, like, to be fair, I mean, yeah. The workers were quite literally only made to do the bidding of humans and harvest resources, and they didn't have any involvement in the collapse of Copper 9, and with nothing else to do, they said fuck it and started their own society, which, you know, seems pretty reasonable to me. We cut back to the worker hideout and see the absolutely giant hole in the ceiling, to which a single worker drone is tasked with fixing it, and when he asks for the simple request of keeping the lights on, they shut it off. Not exactly ideal work conditions, especially with that ladder. Dude, you are not reaching shit with that. While he's trying to figure out how to repair the roof, Jay's corpse mysteriously disappears, and when he goes to investigate, he sees that a weird spider-looking creature is coming out from her body, which proceeds to beam error messages everywhere, even burning it onto the shipping containers. And as the creature seems to grow out of control in the following sound effects, it's safe to assume our worker drone is dead. All this motherfucker wanted was for the lights to be on, and they couldn't even do that. Rest in peace, Frank. While this is occurring, Khan is in the middle of a parent-teacher conference talking to Uzi's teacher about her absence and behavior, which is also able to give us a pretty good picture of how she interacts with other people, and that's not very well. The teacher quite literally suggests that her programming might be damaged, which, like, when you think about it, that's the equivalent of calling someone mentally disabled in this context, and he's saying that to her face. Khan is surprisingly not even mad at this, and more so wonders if he didn't spend as much time with Uzi as he should have, until he's interrupted by another drone and informed about a situation. Later, Thad meets up with Uzi and En to give back the railgun she left behind, and as she goes on about how she's never gonna return, Thad mentions that there have already been a decent amount of disappearances and that Jay's corpse looked like it might have crawled away, which convinces her and En to come back, and looking like he knows something that we don't know. We get a look at what Jay is capable of doing now, making holograms of the people she's killed and using those holograms to kill more people. The three make their way inside the base, but not before getting stopped, and En gives the guard a very thoughtful sorry drawing for murdering thousands if not tens of thousands of workers, which of course works. Meanwhile, as Khan is in the middle of having an actual response to the teacher's earlier comment while he doesn't give a fuck, our attention is put onto two characters in which we have both seen before, being in the first episode laughing at Uzi, these two being Lizzie and Doll. Lizzie asks Doll about where her parents are and she notes that they're dead, saying she watched them die. Also, she speaks Russian for some reason. She is quite literally the only one in the show that does this, and it isn't explained why she does, but whatever. Also, I just want to note that if you put the audio track of the show in Russian, Doll speaks English instead, which is a really cool detail. I like that a lot. Also, shout out to Glitch for having so many dub and subtitle options for their shows. I almost never see it brought up, but it's great that they make these shows so accessible to everyone. The two then see someone who looks exactly like Lizzie outside of the door, and instead of being concerned, Lizzie immediately goes to open the door. Meanwhile, Uzi, Thad, and En look around the base and come across the shipping crates from before that had the error message laser engraved into them, with En pointing out that the symbol looks like Uzi's special eye. Uzi takes a closer look and realizes that the symbol must be called Absolute Solver, and asks En if this is related to how he grew his head back when she blasted it, which finally someone questions that.
New material can't be pulled from thin air. If the wound is severe enough, this solver might be some sort of auto-run program to collect more matter.
Genuinely, how do you get that from a single error message that is barely explained at all? Adding on to my previous complaint about how the characters just miraculously know what to do despite having no prior knowledge, sometimes they will also just get a part of the story perfectly right on the money, which, in my opinion, is not a very interesting or good way to build the world and lore of the show to the viewers, because, spoiler alert, this is exactly what the Absolute Solver can do. It has matter manipulation abilities, which we will see a lot more in the following episodes. Now, this might just be because I also have prior knowledge of what goes on in the show, so this doesn't really surprise me anymore. But looking back on this specific moment, it really doesn't feel like an "oh shit, that's what that is" moment that is built up, but I will say that going with this approach does leave minimal room for any confusion, so I digress. The trio falls silent as they notice a human hand crawling toward them. Shining her flashlight, Uzi tracks where it's coming from, and En shoots a flare from his hand to reveal a giant eldritch millipede looking creature. Oh hell no, they got the Eater of Worlds in that bitch. The creature captures Thad, and as Uzi and En go to chase after him, they find him standing in the hall, very clearly being projected. So they end up throwing a ninja star which goes straight into the ceiling and releases him from the creature's claws. Of course, Jay didn't kill him out of all of the drones because plot armor, baby. However, this is when it's revealed that the creature is actually not Jay, but the solver itself, saying it's, quote, trying to repair that host, and messes with Uzi by showing her dead mom to her, which, yes, this is the first real visual of Uzi's mom. And it's also of note that the solver symbol appears in her eyes for a second, which I'm sure won't be that important. The solver then reveals Kong with his head between his claws and proceeds to rip him in half and eat his body, which is when En comes back to help and asks Uzi for a railgun, which upon handing it over, reveals it's still the solver's holograms. Pinned against the wall, the real En finally comes in and saves Uzi, blowing the creature up, which turns it into this weird black hole looking floating ball thing. The spider looking thing tries to crawl away, but En repeatedly stabs it over and over, which also turns it into another black hole floating ball thing. Touching Uzi's shoulder, she pulls back from En and questions what him and the disassembly drones really are, which is when he runs away. Khan and the WDF find Uzi in the destroyed hallway and she hugs Khan really tightly, revealing that his death was yet another hologram. We flash back to the classroom when Lizzie was going to open the door, and it's revealed that Doll actually has absolute solver powers as well, using them to manipulate matter and warp the door to successfully stop Lizzie. And we cut back to Doll, who's looking at a photo of V for whatever reason. Speaking of which, back at the hideout with V, En feels unbelievably guilty about what just happened with Uzi. V berates him, but it's pretty obvious that she still has a soft spot for him, since we can see that despite her having cut the chain that was supposed to hold her back, she's still keeping herself in place. And the episode ends with Uzi also feeling guilty in her bed, looking up at the note she placed on the ceiling, notably some drawings of the absolute solver symbol over and over. Now, while I did heavily criticize the actual reveal of the absolute solver in this episode, I will say that it was showcased pretty well. You could see how it functioned as an eldritch creature, taking worker drones, killing them, then using their matter to expand and grow, which is a very cool and also also a pretty terrifying concept. A problem I have with this though, and I know this might sound a bit nitpicky to most people, but it would have been better if the creature was first shown and then the trio discovered the error message. In my mind, I feel like it would have been a lot more effective in communicating that this was the solver's doing, and it would have made more sense for Uzi to come to the conclusion that, hey, this is what allowed En to regenerate his head and how that creature became that big, but once again, this isn't that big of a deal. I do think that it's kind of crazy that Uzi just immediately forgave Khan despite him leaving her to literally die. Like, I get that he is her father and she thought that he just saw her get ripped in half, but come on. It wasn't even that long ago that he did that. That is like the equivalent of disowning her. Hell, that's actually way worse now that I think about it. Fuck Khan. All my homies hate Khan. And to make things worse, the solver really did fuck up Uzi's trust with En, because the second she actually starts to open up to him by handing him the railgun, she gets played like a piano by the solver and they awkwardly split things off. Like, come on. Well, hopefully in the next episode they work things out. Speaking of which, let's finally get to it, shall we? As you can tell by the title, this episode centers around a school prom, and oh, would you look at that, we know what year the show is set in. A bulletin board shows that 4 students have recently gone missing. As a girl runs past it, her glasses are completely shattered out of nowhere, messing with her vision. And I know you might be asking, why the fuck would a drone need glasses? You can kinda deduce it from this area here, and this next bit is just like a complete shot in the dark, but I'm just gonna say that the reason why some drones need glasses is that I guess the worker drones have quality control issues with wonky optical sensors, and glasses help with that. She sees a figure in the distance and can't quite make out what it is, and at the same time, security cameras are also being telepathically destroyed, which reveals that Doll is actually the figure she previously saw and was running away from. She uses her solver powers to rip off her fucking arm, damn, and at the same time, turn one cleaver into 3 and throw all of them at the girl, killing her instantly. She comes back home shortly after and takes out a prom queen voting sheet and scratches off the final name, and I think you guys can put 2 and 2 together with why those girls on the board went missing. Uzi wakes up from her sleep still feeling guilty for treating En that way at the end of episode 2, moping around the school and getting picked on by other drones, which is when she actually notices the fuck ton of missing posters on the board, puddle of oil being cleaned, and tampered security camera, which kind of causes her to go into a weird manic episode for about 5 seconds until she notices all of her notes on the ceiling are gone. Oh my fucking god, this guy can't stop being such a fucking bitch! Khan takes all of Uzi's notes and drawings and bundles them with her mom's notes and drawings, which we now know what her real name is, Nori. Uzi is obviously mad at Khan and yells at him for being distant when she was younger, and states that if he wants to be helpful now, he should stay that way. As she goes off to talk to En, Khan does the exact opposite of what Uzi asked by forcing her to go to the prom in a hand-picked dress with Lizzie and Doll. I genuinely cannot fucking stand Khan at all. How did he bag her? Cutting back to En and V, they argue about whether or not they should show up to the prom, as V got En to pick out a suit and dress for the both of them. En doesn't want to go because they're quote too dangerous, and V wants to go to, you know, do murder drone stuff. I think it's funny that En said that because, like, no shit, you're dangerous. You guys are under a spire of corpses that looks like it's hundreds of feet tall. En also once again mentions their past in the mansion, referencing the flashback at the beginning of episode 2. And V is visibly startled by it, asking En for him and that purple thing to stop looking into it. Speaking of that purple thing, Uzi, upon arriving at Doll's home, which just has an entire portion of her room pitch black with the only thing lighting it up being robot bugs, tries to excuse herself, which is shut down immediately as fast as it is brought up. She notices a trash can full of missing posters, and Doll tells her where the bathroom is to change into the dress. Right back at it with En and V again, En tries to cooperate with V, telling her if she's hiding something, they can work it out together. And clearly she doesn't give a fuck because she slices his shit clean off and flies away. I really don't know why he thought that little ass chain would hold her back. For the final time, we switch back to Uzi, who has finished putting on her dress and also ruining Doll's bathroom mirror thanks to the absolute solver. This is when she ends up overhearing Lizzie through the wall and presumably talking to Doll, telling her to quote, do her thing, and then she'll let V in. Also noting that nobody will notice Uzi is missing. Uzi then finally notices the bathtub, which is weirdly covered in oil, and as she opens the curtain, it's revealed that En wakes up from having his head cut off. Yeah, I lied, there's still a bunch more scene switches. As he goes to chase after V, he eyes the suit before going to chase after her again, and then realizes, fuck it, we ball, and puts it on. Behind the curtain, Uzi finds a bunch of shattered mirrors, which are just covered in oil. And I know that lighting makes it look like blood, but it is indeed oil. And she uses them to make a staircase and escape through a vent in the ceiling, which I'm not only surprised there were that many mirrors, but also the fact that she was able to balance all of them and climb them as well. While she's running from the base to go go meet up with N, he coincidentally lands right in front of Uzi, and the two make up for the shitty interaction they last had. While the prom is commencing, Lizzie steps up to the stage to announce the prom queen winner, who ends up being V, since everyone else got taken out by Doll. V was going to kill everyone there, but ends up pulling off, not realizing she won prom queen. The entire thing seems like a trap set by Doll, but right before she's able to execute it, N and Uzi interrupt the ceremony and Lizzie tells V to run, having a change of heart the very last second, which still doesn't work since V gets impaled in both of her hands by Doll. All hell breaks loose as Doll slowly walks up to her, all the while killing other drones, and it's revealed that V was actually the one to have killed both of Doll's parents, as she projects the memory into V's mind. V is able to free up one of her arms and turns into a gun, but the bullets are no use for Doll's powers, bouncing off of a force field, and she puts a stop to it by cutting her arm off and... Wait, what the fuck is that? Is that a fucking combination of an MP510 and an MP5 SD? Liam Vickers, you know ball! Also, I'm not surprised that H&K signed a contract with JC Jensen considering their previous history with the Combine, right before Doll can cut off V's head, and saves her and kicks the cleaver away, which is very noble of him considering V just cut his head off like a few moments ago. Also, would it even matter if V had her head cut off because they can just regrow it back? I don't know, but Uzi and N both step up on the stage to confront Doll, causing her to unlock the gym doors. Doll is shocked that Uzi would side with N and V, bring up the fact that her own mom was also killed by a disassembly drone, but Uzi comes to their defense and says they need to figure out what's going on together or not at all, in which Doll responds by getting the first hit in, and by first hit, I mean first dismemberment. Dude, she turned N into that one fuck-ass drawing of that girl in the hospital bed. Seeing Uzi get flung, Khan finally decides to try and enter the gym again, and Doll immediately locks the door on his bum ass. Doll throws a kitchen knife at Uzi and she catches it through her hand and pulls it out, Ethan Winters style. Doll tries to make Uzi explode like the other drones but can't due to an error. Parrying yet another knife throw, Uzi still gets trapped, but before she is cut up into pieces and is able to repair himself and block the knives thrown at Uzi with his wings. And one thing I just have to mention now is that the soundtrack for this show is amazing. Every single track and all of the ambiance were done by AJ Despricio, and is actually what I've been using the entire time for background music. I mean, why would I use anything else when it's literally meant for this show? The song that's been playing during this fight is called The Knife Dance, and is undeniably one of the best tracks in the entire show. Especially this part. Like, come on, that was pretty fucking badass. Doll introduces low gravity into the fight as Uzi glides into the air and she has tables thrown at her. But she's able to overcome Doll by kicking back one of the knives thrown at her and just straight up kicking her in the face as well. And before Doll can retaliate, Uzi is pissed off at V for shooting Doll, saying they needed her for answers, but luckily she picks up her bracelet that she previously cut off, which has the keys to her house. Upon entering and turning on the lights, it's revealed that the room covered in bugs was actually a kitchen filled with worker corpses. Still cleaner than Asmongold's house though, coming to the conclusion that Doll must have been eating the others, and pulls off a tarp near the kitchen table, which reveals the bodies of Doll's parents, and upon further inspection from Uzi, we find out that Doll's mom was named Yeva from an ID card. While they're not looking, Doll then teleports behind them and uses her powers to repair herself and take the bullet out of her own head, shooting it at Uzi, who is actually able to stop the bullet using her own absolute solver powers, hence why Doll couldn't explode her before. She then says she's sorry for Uzi and that if she finds what she's looking for, she'll help her too, and then teleports away, which obviously frustrates her because she doesn't know what the fuck that means and neither do we, but hopefully we'll find out soon. Outside of the base, a worker drone finds his glasses when suddenly two landing pods come crashing down right next to him and explode, with the third landing pod actually doing what it's designed to do, and out comes a human that slices his head clean off, and it's revealed that this person is actually Tessa of all people. The episode then ends revealing that Jay is alive and Tessa says they both have work to do. Now, despite this episode seeming kinda strange because it's a prom episode in a show about post-apocalyptic sci-fi robots, I do think it was executed pretty well, as the prom was more of an excuse to get these characters together than it was a focus on the prom, which I think is kinda funny. The animation here is a massive improvement from the last two episodes, and spoiler alert, it only gets better from here. The reveal of Uzi also possessing the powers of the Absolute Solver was really cool, especially since it was actually foreshadowed in the pilot episode at the end. Remember when I said a weird glitch happened in her eyes? Well, that was actually the Absolute Solver activating in her code, which is just so cool. I am very critical of this show's writing, but I gotta admit, the foreshadowing that is utilized here and later on in this show is just done amazingly. And to add the cherry on top, we got something brewing between N and Uzi. Ooh, N and Uzi kissing in a tree. Kissing. Okay, let's just move on to the next episode already. Arriving at Camp 98.7, which was seemingly established 69 years ago at this current point in time, Uzi's classroom is here for an apparent normal field trip. However, in a flashback, Khan shows Uzi a picture of him and Nori at the same camp, as well as showing Uzi some of Nori's notes, which shows that she had an ID card much like Yeva. The flashback ends with Khan handing over Nori's necklace to Uzi, telling her to be safe. For once in this show, this guy's actually not being useless? What? A student asks the teacher what they're doing there, and he reveals that this entire trip was Uzi's idea, to which the students are confused because none of them know her, even though she's been their classmate for years. I promise this is actually important to the plot, trust me. Now, instead of just letting them roam around doing whatever, N and V land onto the ground and are revealed to be camp counselors. V straight up just one-taps one of the students for not cooperating, but they warm up a little bit after that and Lizzie joined them by their side. Uzi speaks up saying both N and V are her friends, to which the students respond by immediately going to them and asking if they need more friends. Ouch. Uzi goes off to investigate and holy shit, her backpack is fucking huge. She finds an abandoned building, using her solver powers to break a lock and snap the door wide open. Upon looking around, Uzi doesn't find much except for a calendar which reveals that in this universe, all dogs are immortal. This literally has nothing to do with anything and is actually kind of fucked up when you really think about it, but it's funny, so who cares? Hearing a noise, she looks to her left to see, holy shit, who the hell is that? Who the fuck is that? What the fuck was that? Uzi looks out of the building window to see everyone having fun playing on the frozen lake, and she's kind of jealous. But that's interrupted by the window glass shattering as she experiences high temperatures and scrambles for her backpack, which is filled with worker arms from Doll's room. But before she can dig in, V appears from the ceiling and she kicks it away. And for some reason, V just isn't suspicious about that at all. She confronts Uzi, saying that the camp would help them find a doll and to stop stalking. But it's clear that Uzi is pretty jealous that her and N are already more friendly than her classmates than she ever was, despite them literally having murdered countless workers and knowing them for less than a day. V does notice Uzi's backpack and says she'll eventually be next, scratching her visor with her claw. But when she does go away, Uzi's solver powers repair the scratch instantly. And as she goes to retrieve her backpack, she notices a squash robot bug and uses her powers to repair it. As the bug goes away, Uzi notices it goes under the floorboards and breaks them open, finding a corpse with weird notes and paperwork. While looking at these notes, a green robot bug crawls onto her, which she tries to swat, which is weird because she just healed a different one, but okay. This bug, however, is different from the others, actually being able to express emotion and scan Uzi's face. Upon doing so, the bug recognizes her as 002, the same ID number as Nori, which I'm assuming it scanned the necklace or Uzi's face was a similar match to Nori. So the bug provides Uzi with several options, the last one catching her attention, call elevator. Upon questioning the bug, it replies that it must be placed on a reader in a place called Cabin Fever Labs, essentially acting like a key of some sort. But when asking further questions, it kind of falls apart from there. Oh, hi, doll. While N is teaching the students archery, one of the students just dies at the hands of another student, and nobody cares for some reason. Uzi sneaks to the campsite and using the bug, tells N to not alert V that she's there, to which he does exactly what he's asked not to do. Come on, N, you're better than that. Forced to now show herself, Uzi says hi to everyone, which startles her classmates and results in one of them accidentally shooting an arrow right at her, to which he is able to stop it using her solver powers. But it transforms into a weird fleshy organism, which immediately catches V's attention as she arms herself with blades. Uzi panics for a bit before running into the woods. Shortly after, she finds an abandoned cabin and barricades herself inside, closing the shutters and ripping open her backpack to access the arms. Experiencing extreme sensitivity to light and sound around her, she uses her powers to shatter the clock and lights. However, one of the lights turns into an even larger flesh amalgamation that she can't control, and argues with V about her being so mysterious and why she won't tell him anything she knows. So he flies off to presumably find Uzi. V walks away and lets the students do what they want. So two of them named Darren and Rebecca use this opportunity to sneak off and go make out in a cabin in the woods, but it just so happens to be that same cabin that Uzi was in, emerging from a disgusting flesh cocoon. That's not good. While N is looking for Uzi, he comes across a cabin with a surveillance room of some sort. Looking around the controls, he finds a VHS tape from JC Jensen titled Zombie Drones, which sounds like a 90s B-grade movie. Also, why the fuck is this company still using VHS tapes in a post-Y3K world? Like a DVD would have made more sense or something. Upon touching the tape, N experiences a quick flashback and is pretty startled by it. Hopefully this tape doesn't contain anything super important. Back at the cabin, Uzi is uncontrollably snacking away on the two lovebirds that visited her, as she now possesses a new form that is similar to the disassembly drones but a lot more organic, as her wings and tail are more flesh-like than mechanical. Rebecca was able to get away and alert the others, but it doesn't exactly help much. Killing two more classmates right before Uzi can get her hands on Lizzie, V is able to deflect her attack using her wing and cuts off both her wing and hand. As Uzi regenerates her body parts, V very interestingly calls Uzi not by her actual name, but by a different one, Sin. As she's going in and out of her solvercosis, Uzi says she doesn't know who that is and asks to speak with N. And when V denies that request, she has her arm bitten off by Uzi's tail of all things. Yeah, it's more of a creature than a tail. She's almost able to actually kill V with her own nanite acid, but right before she's able to, N comes out of nowhere and throws her right into the air, and shortly joins her after scolding V a bit. Uzi feels disgusted with herself in her current form, but N is able to have a really heartfelt conversation with her, and get her to turn back to normal right before they hit the ground. Ah, look how cute they are. On the bus ride home, the teacher asks V about why there are so many missing students, but instead of telling the truth about Uzi, she actually takes the blame and he doesn't second guess it. Which, to be fair, the guy is definitely not paid enough to, nor does he want to throw his life away, and notices that Uzi's hand starts to burn in the sunlight, which it didn't before, so he drags it away, and for a split second, Uzi partially interlocks with his hands, which startles him, and the episode ends with him looking at the zombie drones tape he brought along with him. This is by far one of my favorite episodes in the entire show, but it is definitely not without its faults. Uzi transforming into a disassembly drone-like form is really fucking cool and makes sense since V and N also have a bit of Absolute Solver in them, but the way she ends up being pushed over the edge and has the Absolute Solver take over is a bit weird to me. At first, I thought this was just the culmination of the Solver mutating and spreading more within Uzi, which is what causes the transformation, which I'm pretty sure is still correct, but I have also heard another factor that pushed her to transform was her being jealous that V and N fit in with her classmates a lot more than she ever did. I'm pretty sure this is more of a headcanon or theory than anything that's actually been confirmed. Still, if this was the case, I'm pretty mixed about it because on one hand, Uzi is shown to be a lone wolf most of the time throughout the series, not caring about what any of her classmates think and not even really getting much interaction with her own dad, which is why I think this whole jealousy being the cause reason is a bit weird. But on the other hand, she definitely did show bitterness seeing all of them out on the frozen lake. This is also backed by the fact that another one of Uzi's Solver outbursts happens when she stops the arrow shot at her, which occurred when N and V were yet again bonding with her classmates, when previously she was able to casually destroy a lock, hover her flashlight, and bring items to her without any mutations happening. To add on to this, her meltdown literally started occurring after she had witnessed N and V play with her classmates. I find it kinda boring that this is what pushed her to her transformation, but on the other hand, it at least does make some sense. Uzi being jealous would definitely cause her to be a bit more unstable, which would make it easier for the Solver to take over and fuck shit up. However, just because it makes sense doesn't mean it isn't as much of a cop-out reason. But to play devil's advocate, witnessing my classmates that I've known for a presumably large portion of my life remember and get along with two others that they barely knew and previously murdered enough people to make a giant corpse spire would definitely get to me a lot. Like, I can heavily relate to Uzi feeling super envious over other people getting along way better with people I knew for longer, minus the whole murdering people thing. That's kind of the only real quote-unquote problem I have with this episode, is that it isn't really explained how or why Uzi transforms, other than obviously knowing that the Absolute Solver has to do something with it. Everything else is absolutely amazing though. The visuals and animation once again are always beautiful, and Uzi's Solver form really is such an awesome design and fits her well. I wonder if that backpack was purposely foreshadowing it. The lore we also receive from this episode, while minuscule, will end up becoming really important, so I can't complain a whole bunch, which actually does lead into our 5th episode, and arguably one of the most important episodes of the entire show. If you were curious about what was on the zombie drones tape from last episode, well, you don't need to wait at all, since this episode opens up with it. Serving as a training video for JC Jensen employees, the tape explains how to disassemble worker drones and why you need to do so. And a very interesting thing about this tape is that one of the tools they showcase for disassembling looks awfully familiar. If worker drones aren't disposed of properly, there is a very low chance, around 0.01%, that the disposed drone could come back to life. So in theory, in every 10,000 improperly disposed of drones, one should reboot. And what's very interesting about this is right before the tape ends, we can see a pie chart of what is different about the drone when they come back to life. 70.3% of rebooted drones have no changes compared to when they were first functioning, 29% go through terminal lockout, whatever that means, and 0.7% have potentially hazardous mutations. So if we do the math here, if you improperly dispose of a worker drone, there is a 1 in 14,290,000 chance that it can contain potentially hazardous mutations when it comes back to life. I'm sure that will never happen. Those odds are way too low, and besides, you just gotta dispose of them correctly. Well, that's not good. Under the mountain of destroyed worker drones, our attention is focused on an armband attached to one of the disposed workers, who must have not been disposed of properly because it comes back to life shortly after. Hey buddy, you just hit a 1 in 10,000 chance. Go buy a lottery ticket. We get an outside shot of a large man before getting an inside view of various worker drones dressed as butlers and maids, but in complete stillness due to an error. However, one of them is still functioning like normal, that being N. If you couldn't piece 2 and 2 together, this is the same manner that was shown in the flashback from episode 2. And spoiler alert, this is a flashback episode, but I promise it isn't some filler bullshit. There's some really interesting stuff here. Reading a book about dog breeds, N finds a drawing he made of himself and V, alongside J's own drawing. Speaking of V, she too is stationary alongside the other drones for whatever reason. As N continues to read, the basement trapdoor V is standing behind starts to bang, causing books to fall down, which want him to enter the basement for whatever reason, to which N proves to us that he would survive a horror movie if he were in one. Going to the bar to see, oh my god, what the fuck is that thing? Oh, it's just that drone from episode 2 we never knew the name of. She asks N if he wants to attend the gala that is being held at the manor that night, to which he responds that they can't since they weren't invited due to just being worker drones, and we can see that her body movements are pretty awkward. While cleaning off some oil on his platter that just appeared out of nowhere, N sees that a message is reflecting from it. Basement, now! Stop ignoring me! He's still a worker drone here, how the fuck did he do that? After showing some puppy eyes, quite literally, N agrees to ask Tessa if they can attend, and the two arrive at the dining hall, which is currently being set up by other worker drones.
Were you programmed by beasts?
There's a certain joke to be said here, but I'm not gonna say it. As Jay and Tessa are talking to each other, Tessa notices N and hugs him, but he notices a message on the window behind her that says, when you about to frickin' die, speak out loud, ID Dark X Wolf 17. Tessa then notices who N brought along with him, and it's clear that she's not as excited to see her, to which she informs Tessa that Jay forgot to let her out of the basement, which is pretty cruel. Before she can say anything else, however, Tessa's mother arrives and scolds her for bringing her drones and orders that not just N, V, and J to be thrown out, but all the ones in the library as well. The weird robot then talks back to Tessa's mother, saying that not only are the drones not broken, but that they can't be thrown out either. And before she can say or do anything, N takes the blame for her behavior and is promptly thrown outside and tied to a tree and pecked by crows. You know, classic worker drone punishment. N fails to try to lure the crows away, so in a last-ditch attempt to save himself, he remembers the ID on the window and says it out loud, causing all of the crows to flock away except for one. As its bones snap around and eyes get eviscerated, suddenly the absolute solver symbol shows up. The user ID from before pops up above it, revealing it to be Uzi controlling the crow now, which you might be wondering, how the hell is Uzi here if this is a flashback, and we'll get to that eventually. Tessa and Jay are chained up in a bedroom for the previous incident, which really just showcases how shitty her parents are. And this is also where we definitively find out what the name of the awkward robot is, Sin, which is the name that V called Uzi back in Cabin Fever, and if you paid close attention, appeared on the armband of the drone that woke up at the start of this episode. Tessa looks over at Sin, who, holy shit, she's the thing again. Sin tells Tessa that because she didn't throw away her and the other drones, she'll spare her and the others and warns her not to go to the gala, before escaping through a window. Back at the tree, Dark X Wolf 17 is explaining to N that these are his memories and he ended up passing out due to an internal program trying to delete them. So she's here to prevent that by helping him remember, which would save his memory files. And it's pretty safe to assume that the internal program is the absolute solver that is trying to delete these memories. One interruption from Khan later, which does reveal that Uzi watched the zombie drones tape and that V is also a part of this memory operation, and N and Dark X Wolf 17 are back in the library, which is now covered in blood and mechanical parts. And I just mean straight up blood, no oil this time around. N hesitates to move forward, and Dark X Wolf 17 tells him that she can pull him out of the memory anytime, but if she does, he will not be able to get back these memories, which are important to both him and her. After ushering N to the trapdoor and moving V aside, it's revealed that the trapdoor is locked and Jay has the key. The fuck is this Resident Evil puzzle bullshit?
Now here's a weird fucking door.
The two are annoyed, but quickly look back at V after hearing a giggle, noticing her hand looks a bit different from before. Tessa and V eventually break out from their chains and sneak out to stop Sin, who is most definitely planning on killing everyone at the gala. Finding a sword and a Uberti 1851 Navy revolver, I will not shut up, Liam. N and Dark X Wolf 17 suddenly appear and motion the two to lay low. As a pair of glasses falls from above, they look up and see V crawling on the ceiling. Dark X Wolf 17 takes the basement key from Jay right before V ambushes them. Jay tells N and Dark X Wolf 17 to go to the basement to do their thing as she and Tessa stall V.
Crikey, what a bounding hump to ruffle.
Why are you talking like that?
As much as this show gets dunked on for its humor, this was a pretty funny joke, I won't even lie. As N and Dark X Wolf 17 make their way to the basement trapdoor while hearing sounds behind them, as soon as it's unlocked, an Eldritch Sin bursts out and absolutely crushes Dark X Wolf 17 before dragging N into the basement by the leg. But before she can fully do so, Uzi takes over the creature. I have no idea what kind of memory hijacking this is or how it works, but just roll with it. V appears once again, so Uzi drags N into the basement, and they look for clues, which consist of a shit ton of mutilated worker corpses, as well as N's own decapitated self. Uzi suggests that they get out of there, as in stop the flashback, since they found what they were looking for, which really doesn't explain anything at all, but we'll get to that. When all of a sudden, Uzi is dragged out of the flashback. Doll suddenly appears in Uzi's room, which causes the eldritch being she had been controlling in the memory to regain control, strapping N in the chair with the intent to reset his memories. Meanwhile, Sin teleports directly to the gala, but right before she can attack anyone, Tessa and Jay appear to stop her. And when I say Tessa and Jay, I mean Tessa shoots a single bullet from a revolver, which is immediately deflected by Sin, throws her fucking gun at her when it still had 5 more shots left, and she also chucks random glassware from a platter. Sin responds to this in an elegant manner by immediately taking control of all the workers in the room and proceeding to slaughter everyone.
This nigga is trash.
While listening to the horrifying screams of everyone dying, N is still in his chair as the eldritch creature fails to pick up any of its surgical tools until it has the sudden idea to get V's help. This is when we are brought out of the memory again to see Uzi and Doll fighting for the bug from last episode, to which Uzi eventually gives it up and hands it to her after seeing that N and V are about to lose their memories, and Doll teleports away. Back inside the memory, V is also unable to pick up the scalpel with her claw hand, despite having a perfectly good hand. What is she doing? So N takes the glasses out of his suit and puts them on her, and despite being broken, they do fix her optical sensors and also cause her to regain some of her memory and spare him. But the Eldritch stops that immediately and goes back to trying to do the job itself with the good old ice pick and hammer method. But before it's able to sink it right into his brain, Uzi takes control again and is able to finally realize who Dark X Wolf 17 is.
Uzi? Don't freaking dox me?
How can you even get doxed here? Is this memory shit online multiplayer or something? After N and V wake up from their flashback to see Uzi, we cut to Doll walking on a frozen lake to meet with Jay and Tessa of all people, handing over the key bug to them. Doll asks for the two to take her with them before being rudely interrupted by a gunshot that she is able to deflect, in which Tessa defends herself, saying it was a test. As soon as they are ready to go, Jay and Tessa come across Uzi, N, and V, and the episode ends with Lee funny perfectly cut off gasp. I wish I was joking. Besides the quite frankly really shit ending of this episode, I really do like this one, especially when it comes to the lore, because holy fuck, we get a lot of backstory here. But of course, once again, it is still made a bit more complicated than it should be with the whole Uzi now being involved in the memory situation and things still not being very clear. I will take it though, we know a lot more of N, V, and J's backstory. I honestly don't have much else to say about this episode for now, so let's move on to the next episode, which is the starting point at which questions are finally being answered. So, hooray! Dead End opens up with an office space having all of its lights shut off, as a worker drone is hyperventilating and seemingly hiding from something. She looks around her cubicle to see another worker who is in a completely still position as its visor displays a boot loop. She attempts to save the worker, but out of nowhere, two creatures tear it apart, and she soon shares the same fate when a velociraptor-looking robot flashes a light at her, causing her to be boot looped and killed. Going back to where we left off from the last episode, Jay and Tessa explain to V and Uzi the reason they're on Copper 9. Sin disappeared from Earth, so Tessa decided to pursue her and landed here since Sin's last known action was attacking worker drones on exoplanets. The reason for this is what they're trying to figure out. Also, Jay is alive again because apparently they had multiple clones of her and she was more effective at killing workers, so yeah, that's cool I guess. While the five are having their happy little get together, Doll realizes she actually wants the bug again, so she uses her solver powers and just yoinks it back. One short chase later, Doll falls into a huge hole, Undertale style, so the group recoups their thoughts. Tessa instructs Jay to relay Sin's orders, which were apparently to clear human life off of the planet and construct spires, which would explain the whole killing workers and making giant towers using their corpses thing. The second order was to enter Cabin Fever Labs, which while this giant hole doesn't lead directly to them, it is connected, and it's what that key bug was supposed to be used for when it said call elevator back in the 4th episode. Before the four jump down the hole, Uzi asks why Doll is involved, and Tessa says it's because she thinks the humans gave her parents a sickness she inherited, and she thinks Doll is right. Also, I did mean to say 4 because Tessa's ass just sent Jay to look after the spaceship, so she does absolutely fucking nothing again. Oh my god! When the four find the entrance to the facility, it is absolutely absolutely covered in disassembly drone corpses, and Tessa recalls that there's security against the drones down here, which are called anti-drone sentinels or just sentinels, which are the robots that were seen at the beginning of the episode. Tessa says she can control the security, which doesn't work, and when they find a route to the elevator, Tessa just falls right into a rope trap and gets dragged away. That's not good. Chasing after Tessa, the trio finds a baby worker drone playing human baby noises, and En and Uzi's first thought is to shoot it, and En misses every single shot somehow. The baby somehow grows spider limbs out of nowhere and escapes, which is when a worker drone we have never seen before appears and EMPs them. Also, just a heads up, this drone is named Alice, and her name is quite literally never said in the episode, and the only reason people know that's her name is because the subtitles say so. Uzi wakes up in some sort of operation/surveillance room with a magnet stuck to her head that essentially serves as a sedative to the drones. Looking to her left, she sees Alice cutting the head off of the drone from the beginning of the episode, Diana Fire style. She's revealed to be some sort of part collector, which in this case would be more like organ harvesting, and she also happens to be pretty damn skilled at it since she has quite a few disassembly drone cores to her name. Oh yeah, also V is in this room. Uzi tries to use her solver powers, but the magnet prevents her from doing so, and the girl comments that she's dealt with witches before, and notices Uzi's necklace saying O2 left him to die, referring to Nori. In a different room where Tessa and En are being strapped down, the baby drone is also harvesting En's parts, but he's weirdly not fazed by it at all, instead being encouraging and telling him where to saw, which weirdly puts some trust in En. Right before he can saw through though, Alice asks him for more magnets, and this is where we learn what his name is, that being Bo. Bo gets some magnets and leaves the room to go to Alice, which is when Tessa cuts herself out with the minimal where vanilla M9 bayonet she just pulls out of nowhere and frees En. While Bo is sticking the magnets to Uzi, she asks Alice about her mom but doesn't get any answers, and when Alice commands Bo to go back to En and Tessa, Uzi notices on the cameras that they both escaped. Alice shines a light on Uzi, saying she's a lot like her except without the yellow eyes. Uzi tries to stop Alice from cutting her finger but immediately gets the Ethan Winters treatment once again. Alice calls her by Nori and says that her, quote, imploding all of them folks was pretty sick, which does not have very good implications. Uzi tries to dig deeper but ends up getting part of her finger cut off. Bo returns to the room where En and Tessa were held, only to find out that En and Tessa aren't there anymore, so he immediately goes back to where Uzi and V are being held. En sees where Bo went to and notifies Tessa, who's on one of the office computers. She says they'll save V, to which En kinda awkwardly stands there and says Uzi as well. In response to this, Tessa shows En a live feed of the Earth, and yeah, it's not a good sign. Alice is looking at the cameras to see where Bonnie and Chica are when she looks back at Uzi, whose finger she just cut off regenerates. Alice then shuts the door of both the room that En and Tessa were in, along with the room she's currently in, and opens a third door that was closed before, letting out a bunch of sentinels. You're not very good at conserving power, Alice. You know at this rate you're gonna run out by 4 AM. Also, side note, this entire location would make for a really cool FNAF fan game, just saying. If anyone out there has the talent to make one, it would be really cool. We finally get to see what En was seeing on the computer screen, and oh, the entire Earth exploded. Great, that's great. Tessa explains that Sin was infected by the Absolute Solver, which then started spreading to other planets, with the humans on Copper 9 trying to research what actually happened by establishing cabin fever labs, but all they did was spread it. We actually get some really important footage of Nori being infected before taking out a camera, meaning that she is most likely the reason why Uzi has the Absolute Solver as well, and suggests that Uzi could be fixed from the Absolute Solver and asks if that's why Tessa's here, to which she corrects him, stating that she's there to find the list of every single drone who was infected, which is at Cabin Fever Labs, and she gives En an ultimatum of needing to choose the universe over Uzi, implying that it would be for her own good. Before En is able to process this, however, he immediately gets boot looped by a sentinel and is thrown against a wall, which Alice and Uzi witness on the cameras. Bo also notices that Uzi is attempting to use her solver powers, which not only causes her visor to crack completely, but also turns her eyes yellow as well, and that there's a weird glitch happening toward the door buttons. Before the sentinel is able to dig right into its En Happy Meal, Tessa tries to pull a Chris Pratt in Jurassic World stunt, and nope, yeah, it didn't work. Upon seeing blood from the bite, however, the sentinel realizes that since Tessa's a human, it just violated its programming to hurt drones, not humans, so it immediately bashes its head against a wall and dies. Lowkey kinda real that after making one mistake, it just immediately killed itself. As Alice is watching Tessa starting to get swarmed by sentinels, everything around her starts to float, which is when she looks behind her and sees that Uzi is completely possessed by the Absolute Solver, as she creates a black hole that disintegrates the door controls, causing every single door to come open, and she falls unconscious right after. Alice tries to close the door, but is met with a flash and a stomp to the dome. Holy shit, her head just exploded. Right before the sentinel is able to attack Uzi, Bo sacrifices himself by distracting it and slicing off V's restraints using his disassembly drone arm, and then immediately gets the same treatment as Alice. Crawling to Uzi to untie her, another sentinel walks into the room and they both corner V, which by the way, how did she not get boot looped from that first flash? There's no way she didn't get hit by that. V takes out her gun arms and prepares to start spraying, but the black hole from before appears once again and kills both of the sentinels, leaving a very fleshy organic substance from behind. Also, since we get a closer look at the guns here, they look so cool, but I have no idea why that Picatinny mount is there besides for looks, because there's no reason for a sight. Anyways, V looks back at Uzi and her visor seems to be repairing itself once again. En wakes up from his boot loop as Tessa carried him back to the other room, and V and Uzi burst down from a vent and the four reunite. V berates Tessa for saying that she had control over the Sentinels when she clearly didn't. Tessa tells N that she hadn't been honest with V yet, and that obviously piques her curiosity. But before she can press her, Uzi wakes up and hugs N. Aww. Meanwhile, the Sentinel that killed itself somehow comes back to life, but now with red eyes, and tracks the footsteps of the group. But they are able to hide from it and make their way to the secret elevator. To their shock, Doll got boot loops just meters away from the proximity reader to call the elevator with the key bug stuck in her hands. V says it's a trap, so Uzi attempts to use her solver powers to grab it, but N and V stop her from doing so. However, Tessa goes right on over and grabs the key bug. Nothing happens so far, but it just seems too good to be true. While they walk on over to Tessa, N and Uzi hold hands. There's nothing else to say, I just wanted to mention that. When they group up, Doll suddenly steals the key bug again after tricking them with a fake boot loop using a gift. So she calls the elevator, releases a shit ton of Sentinels she had locked in the hallway, and jumps down the hole before the actual elevator arrives. Tessa distracts the Sentinels by quote humaning everywhere, which does cause some of the Sentinels to go away. However, the red-eyed Sentinel from before arrives once again with a focus on human blood. Using her solver powers, Uzi decides to create a hole in the elevator, but she ends up not being able to control it and creates another black hole. Finding a disassembly drone arm, the Sentinel shoots a bullet at Tessa, but V not only stops the bullet from hitting her, she catches it while it's still spinning and hits the arm and disables it. Holy fucking aura. Seeing that Uzi is unable to control herself, and cuts off her hand and she gets possessed by the solver again for a split second, but it does stop the black hole. Tessa drags N and Uzi into the elevator while V fights the Sentinel, now being immune to flashes since she's wearing her glasses, which I honestly have no idea how that works since they aren't sunglasses, but whatever. As soon as she's about to kill the Sentinel, another one arrives and destroys the proximity reader, which starts to bring the elevator back up. She ends up dropping her glasses, which also get crushed by yet another Sentinel, and more start to surround her. She tells Uzi that she trusts her before cutting the cables to the elevator and salutes goodbye, ending the episode. Now, as much as I do like this episode, and once again, this is my opinion, it does feel the most unnecessary out of all of them. And when I mean unnecessary, I mean you could skip this episode, watch everything else, and be fine. Like, yeah, we do find out that the entire Earth is fucked, a little bit of Nori information, and how the absolute solver is affecting Uzi, but I mean, if it was just the last 4 minutes or so of the episode, it would have sufficed. Which sucks to say that. I don't like the fact that this episode is a bit of a nothing burger. However, I'll go more into why I think this episode is kind of uneventful later, because we got a cliffhanger to witness. Or more like an elevator faller or something, I don't know. Moving on to episode 7. Okay, I get that they were working on digital circuits as well, but did the time between this episode and episode 6 have to be 7 fucking months? We start the episode with a flashback that takes place at the Cabin Fever Cathedral, which is completely underground, so how the fuck is there rain and thunder? As a group of scientists have Nori chained up to try and keep her contained, which is not going to plan. An intern named Mitchell accidentally wears a uniform belonging to a different scientist by the name of Dr. Chambers, who must be pretty important since the other scientists call upon him to do something. Solver Nori ends up trying to attack him before shortly being contained by the strong-ass magnet, but it's clear it won't hold her off for long. Another scientist by the name of Ridley tells him to get 048 and hands him Yeva's ID card, which if you remember is Doll's mom, and starts to slowly walk towards Solver Nori with a crucifix that has a USB port sticking out of it. Running past chained up Sentinels, Mitchell runs into a mineshaft looking area to retrieve Yeva from a locker, who's pretty fucking good at playing Tetris. I just realized in the middle of recording this audio that the reason why she's probably playing Tetris is because Tetris originated from Soviet Russia, so that's honestly a really cool detail. The two then run back toward the cathedral, but Mitchell notices that the Sentinels somehow escape from their chains. Upon getting back to the cathedral, Mitchell looks around and sees that things have been handled, as Ridley stabbed the USB crucifix right into Nori's visor. Youch. For some reason, Yeva didn't follow him inside and he blocks her from entering, lying by claiming he couldn't find her. Ridley doesn't seem to mind, so he starts to walk on over, which is when he notices the USB crucifix lying on a puddle of blood, and upon looking to his left, he sees the real Ridley with her hand cut off, who then subsequently gets dragged right into a big fucking hole. Yeah, the entire thing was one giant hologram, and the solver ended up actually killing all of them. In the middle of everything going to shit, we get a shot of one of the computers flashing on screen for a split second. Core collapse. So we can assume this takes place right before Copper 9's core exploded. As the cave around him starts to crumble, Mitchell grabs the crucifix and witnesses Solver Nori walk out of the hole. When the solver itself thanks him for, quote, the new host, she yoinks the crucifix right out of his hand and spikes it at him, ending the flashback that was actually a video. Someone with solver power seems to be inspecting a crucifix that, while it looks like the one from the video, it isn't. So she throws it away and reveals herself to actually be the heart of a drone that is drinking oil, listening to Nightcore from an iPod with cat headphones, and drawing herself as an anime girl. Literally the worker drone equivalent of this image. Also, don't ask ask how a heart is able to do all of that. As she marks off an X on a map, she grabs a pickaxe and a toolbox to head to a hole, which reveals that she's actually set up within the cathedral itself. We then see En, Tessa, and Uzi fall out of the elevator from the last episode into a mine shaft, the rubble from the crash covering the entrance they came from. Upon seeing the wall in front of him, En tries to break apart the rubble to go save V, calling upon Uzi to help and use her solver powers. Tessa calls out to En to be careful, which is when he looks behind him, seeing Uzi split apart a rock he threw using her powers, but it's clear that she isn't in a stable condition. Right when En starts to apologize, Tessa tells En that they'll save V after taking care of their business. So she tells Uzi to stand by and wait in an area. En tells Uzi that there might be things down there she wouldn't want to see, which is when she obviously and reasonably starts to get nervous. Tessa hints at En that she wants him to take out Uzi now, but he states that the both of them aren't gonna hurt her. This starts to make her panic, which causes a black hole to form from her hand that implodes and causes more rubble to fall down, splitting the trio. You know, that really couldn't have gone worse. Like, I know En was also talking to Tessa as well, but bringing up the fact that you aren't gonna hurt someone out of nowhere is not very reassuring, you know? The scene cuts to Thad and Lizzie walking outside, Thad asking why they're there, to which he responds saying that she's a good friend and secrets are blackmail, which really doesn't say a lot. Out of nowhere, everywhere around him, including the two themselves, start to float in the air before they drop down seconds later, to which they immediately see a landing pod arrive around them. Jay gets out of the landing pod and flies inside the spire, and Lizzie confirms to Thad that Jay's the reason they're out there. Back in the mineshaft on En's side, he calls out for Uzi, who's nowhere to be seen, alongside Tessa. Noticing his arm is complete and utterly fucked, he begins to amputate it before hearing a voice out in the distance, followed by a glowing pair of yellow eyes that reveal itself to be V's worker drone form. Okay, this is super off topic, but one time when I was playing CSGO in like 2021, I tried to mimic a perfectly cut scream in the team voice chat, but I stopped my scream before letting go of the push to talk key, and one of my teammates pointed it out, and after that I never found perfectly cut screams funny again. As Uzi picks herself up from the ground, she notices a bulletin board in front of her that has a picture of Nori with solver symptoms. And if you pause to read what it says that Team 06, which was Ridley's team from the flashback, was tasked with reattempting Nori's recovery using a failsafe USB, which I'm guessing was the crucifix. And what they mean by recovery, I'm guessing was to cure the solver from her, which didn't exactly go to plan. She notices another paper with a picture of the cathedral, so looking around she finds a lantern and goes to look for it. As En is frantically sawing his arm off, the V-Skinwalker tells him that he's one of the main reasons that she wanted his team to retain their personalities. This catches him off guard and a claw comes out and grabs him by the leg, which separates him from his arm. Emerging from the shadows this time is Sin, who gives him a hug that causes him to remember that he and a shit ton of disassembly drones essentially genocided the entire human race. Showing Jay and V switching down humans and eating their arms, and even an entire attack helicopter being destroyed by a single giant tentacle, which I don't know why it's a giant tentacle, but whatever. Point is, they killed all of humanity. When En snaps out of the flashback, Sin thanks him for, quote, clearing the way on this planet too, before dragging him into the darkness. Uzi eventually does find the cathedral, which is once again thundering underground. How the fuck is it doing that? And she flies her way inside. Upon looking around, she notices the giant mystery flesh pit in the ground, which isn't a national park this time, but the sound of blaring nightcore causes her to turn around, and she stumbles upon that worker drone heart setup. Uzi notices the video of the flashback pause on one of the monitors and rewinds to play the entire thing. As En is wailing around and being dragged into the flesh hole of hands, a pickaxe suddenly chops the arm that was flailing him around, and the worker heart shows herself, throws a crucifix at En, which lands on his hands, and questions why Sin was trying to kill her own drones. Before he can really answer, the solver starts chasing the two again, so she starts to give directions as En runs away. She asks if he can get the crucifix to someone named Khan, and En responds with,
"Uzi's dad?"
which immediately catches her off guard, and she asks him,
"How do you know my daughter?"
Whoa, hey, whoa, what? I mean, some of you probably saw this plot twist coming from a mile away, but yeah, this is Nori, who was supposedly dead according to Khan in the first episode. How is she still technically alive as a heart? No idea. Anyways, let's go back to the surface. Thad and Lizzie are attempting to ambush Jay, but before they can even get many steps on the outside of the spire, the inside explodes, and she flies away in the landing pod. Looking at the fire, Khan suddenly appears from behind them and hands Thad the blueprint to Uzi's railgun, which once again is more like a laser cannon, but whatever, and he looks for parts to repair it, when suddenly the gravity shifts again for a bit and goes back to normal. Holy shit, Khan is not being a bum for once. Back underground, Tessa is looking through the lockers that used to hold the other drones, who are all dead or missing. She unlocks a computer via scanning her fingerprint and is able to gain access on every single drone that took part in whatever test Cabin Fever labs were taking. Noticing that the status of everyone besides Nori and Yeva had no effect or were corrupted, whatever that means. Yeva, however, was able to receive patch 2.1.8, but Nori was still in progress, whatever that means again. This data is interesting, however it doesn't mean anything to Tessa because she just blows up the bitch like it's nothing. As she looks at the fire, she senses Doll and catches her murder attempt, and Doll asks Tessa where the patch is. Tessa acts oblivious, but Doll pushes further, asking about the USB patch which exercises the solver possession, and Tessa seemingly confirms that the crucifix is the USB patch. She cuts off Doll's makeshift eye patch, revealing a fleshy organic wound in her visor, and Doll demands for the crucifix to prevent the solver from using her to consume the planet. Tessa knocks the knife out of Doll's hand and seemingly disappears into thin air, and the fire follows as well, plunging her into darkness. Doll's sensors see that something is charging at her in the dark but can't make out what it is. She tries to defend herself by throwing a rock at the creature, but it splits it in half and ambushes her. There is no way they didn't use Withered Foxy's jump scare as a reference for that. We cut back to Mitchell's flashback of all things. As the solver thanks Nori for the new host, we see what really happened to him as right before the crucifix actually kills him, Yeva saves him using her solver powers and throws it right back at her, stabbing her in the face. Nori takes out the crucifix and throws it into the flesh pit before collapsing to the ground, and Mitchell just gets the hell out of there. Yeva reaches her hand out to Nori, who still has her hand partially being controlled by the solver, creating a black hole, so she cuts it off and it goes into the flesh pit as well. Yeva helps up Nori, who seems to now be in control of herself again, but a big flash of yellow appears right behind them and this is what actually caused the core collapse. Holy shit, we're finally getting fucking answers. Nori is explaining the story to En, who is pinned against the wall with her pickaxe, and she reveals that after the core collapse, she woke up on the surface and then eventually had Uzi, and also shows one of her ramblings, which does reveal that her mind did get kinda messed up after that. She says that the solver found its way back onto the planet to finish its job, but doesn't know who the host is, and suggests that it could be Uzi or Doll, and Nori asks which one was trying to attack them, which frightens him. Uzi finishes the video, and while also starting to succumb to solver possession, she takes off her neck collar in shock. She then notices that Doll is lying on the floor near her, dead, the Russian on her visor translating to fight back. Tessa then walks in on the scene. En and Nori are on their way to bring the crucifix, but he is specifically told by Nori to not tell Uzi she's alive, or else she'll kill him. En bites back, saying he isn't going to keep secrets from Uzi anymore, but she tells him the reason why she doesn't want her to know she's alive is because she sees herself as the cause for everything bad in her life. She technically caused the planet's destruction and is the reason why the disassembly drones are there in the first place. En also adds that she gave Uzi, quote, ungodly elder genetics, which we'll get to that eventually. En does eventually promise to wait, but only until Nori tells Uzi herself that she's alive. Back at the cathedral, Tessa starts to approach Uzi as she thinks that Uzi was the one that killed Doll. Uzi starts to mutate parts out of her back and attempts to use her solver powers on Tessa, but oddly enough, she isn't able to due to a like object error. Right before Tessa is able to fully stab Uzi's heart, En puts a blade to her neck and asks if she knew about the patch, giving her one chance to answer.
Cute. You know why I keep you around here?
Holy fuck, he wasn't bullshitting. As En contemplates what he just did, Uzi takes the sword out from her chest and grabs the crucifix in En's hand as he helps her up. When out of nowhere, Uzi crushes En's hand and completely shatters the crucifix, as she is now completely possessed by the solver. Right before she is able to kill En, however, he is saved once again by Nori, and the three get into a beautifully animated fight scene. I'm not gonna describe the entire thing because what's the point, but this shit was fucking raw. After some guns blazing, black holes, and amputated hands, Nori throws a pickaxe at Uzi, but En notices that the solver is seemingly trying to get killed on purpose, so he pushes Uzi out of the way, resulting in both of his arms being cut off. Nori goes to look, but is picked up by Uzi, and she bats a real zinger. Right before Uzi is about to eat Nori, and gets both of their attention by revealing that the two have been hanging out, to which Nori gets real mad at that, mentioning that the disassembly drones killed her mom and smacks the shit out of her. This causes Uzi to break free from the solver's control and get mad at the heart, as she proceeds to kick her into the flesh pit, and obviously freaks out at that and accidentally reveals to Uzi that that was her mom, and while the two scream at each other, they eventually just hug. Aww. The moment doesn't last for long, however, as right before Tessa's head falls into the pit, her own corpse stops it from falling, reattaches it onto her body, and takes off the spacesuit, a tendril laying down her helmet. She uses that tendril to drag Doll's corpse toward her, and En and Uzi take notice as she eats her heart, which is when it's finally revealed that this was never Tessa at all. This was Sin wearing her skin the entire fucking time. What? She bites En's neck and stabs Uzi before retreating into the pit, as several tendrils start flailing from it and another core collapse being imminent, shooting a beam of light into the sky. Jay arrives at the surface in her landing pod, but she's immediately smacked by the school bus from episode 4, causing her to drop the keys into the pit. She questions who the driver survivors are, as we see Khan laying on top of the bus, Lizzie with Uzi's railgun, and Thad with some random metal pipe. Also, one detail that I absolutely love here is that when Uzi's railgun lights up, for a split second, Jay's visor says prior hazard on it, which is pretty funny. As N lays unconscious, he and Uzi are grabbed by the tendril tentacle thingies, but right before they fall in, Uzi impales her hand on a bone and grabs onto N. As he wakes up, Uzi notices the keys falling down, so she makes the decision to sacrifice herself, throwing N back up and then grabbing the keys to cut off part of his leg that the tendril was grabbing onto. And before N can help, she pushes him right out the cathedral doors and free falls into the pit. The episode ends with Uzi waking up to floating pebbles hitting her visor. Realizing she's not dead, she looks in front of her to see that she is floating in space, and that all of Copper 9 has exploded. Holy fucking shit. This episode was a fucking bombshell when it released, and I just remember everyone going crazy over it. And I mean, how could you not? Nori was found to be alive, Doll gets killed off, the solver almost possessing Uzi entirely, Tessa is revealed to have never actually been Tessa in the first place and just Sin using her as a skin suit, and now the entire planet has blown up. This definitely tied with Cabin Fever as being my personal favorite episode. It's just so good, man. So good that the next episode would end up coming out 5 fucking months later. So, the final episode of Murder Drones. 3 years in the making, it all led to this 8th installment. Let's just get straight to it. The finale starts with a lead up to Uzi ending up in space as zero gravity introduces itself to Copper 9. We see Uzi's teacher grading her essay, which is literally just some bullshit that still somehow gets an A, when he sees that everything is floating around in his classroom, then instantly drops to the floor as the classroom goes up in the air and then ends up in space. Man, he really does not give a fuck. He walks outside the door to see that Copper 9 now has a giant hole through it, which suddenly has glowing tendrils coming out of it, grabbing onto everything, including his classroom. Actually, now that we're here, can we actually give this guy a name? Like, he literally doesn't have a name besides the teacher or Uzi's teachers, so my headcanon for him now is that his name is Mr. Vicker because Liam Vickers himself voices him, so yeah. Anyways, we get to where we left off last episode with Uzi floating in space and drifting off, when suddenly a rock stops her movement, which was thrown by Nori, as we see her going from rock to rock. Uzi tries to call out to her, but no sound is made because sound can't travel in the vacuum of space. Very nice detail. Looking at her mouth movement, it looks like she's saying mom. The two do eventually get face to face though, and Nori apologizes for hitting her last episode. Uzi asks how to stop Sin, to which she asks if she has the crucifix patch. Uzi embarrassingly admits she destroyed it when she was possessed, and she's worried about it happening again if she uses her powers. To which Nori throws her cabin fever choker at her that she took off last episode and calls her a little bitch for worrying about that. Yeah, we definitely know where Uzi got her mannerisms from, and it wasn't Khan. Nori tells Uzi that the absolute solver needs a host to survive, so what they need to do is destroy Sin's heart. So Nori hands Uzi her pickaxe and as Uzi hangs on for dear life and uses his tail and drags her inside the landing pod, to which she's kinda pissed off about him hitting her. En's also a bit mad at Uzi for her sacrifice move she pulled, but the two make up really fast as En swerves through meteors. When they're finally in a safe spot, the two have a heartfelt moment, which is immediately crashed by Sin's tendrils as she rips the spaceship in half, causing the two to start barreling toward Copper 9's core. While they both freefall, Uzi talks to En about the relationship, and they finally confirm that the two are dating, baby! Yes, bitch! I've been waiting for times like this! The two share a hug, and then shortly after get ready to, quote, murder a planet. As Jay is holding an apology note from En while sitting on a floating island that Sin is spinning using her tendrils had also destroyed her landing pod. God, that was a mouthful. We see Thad, Lizzie, and Khan hanging on to the edge of that same island, not being able to get up due to centripetal force. Hey, I guess that AP physics class I took in high school wasn't so useless after all. Khan tries to reach for the railgun but isn't successful, and Jay tries to fly toward the planet's core but also can't due to the gravity of the island. As she continues to try and escape, she gets pissed off and shoots a missile at the trio, which is deflected by none other than V. Holy shit, she's not dead? Oh yeah, also that red-eyed sentinel is their pet now, and their canon name I'm pretty sure is Sparky. I have no idea where they got that name from, but that's what I'm calling them from now on. When the missile explodes, the island stops spinning, so V rides Sparky to fight Jay, all while confronting her about betraying her and N to work for Sin. Lizzie is looking at her previous text messages from V that showed that she survived the sentinel attack and was able to tame Sparky, and that she was the one that wanted Lizzie to find Jay. As Sparky is shaking out Lizzie for spare change, V slams Jay into the island, which causes Khan, Thad, Lizzie, and Sparky to get sent into zero gravity. As the two are fighting, V yells at Jay saying she was supposed to get away and do their job so it could leave them alone, which I'm going to assume she means the absolute solver. Jay bites back saying that the solver tricked her, and if anything, it also tricked Jay as well, implying she ended up finding about Tessa's demise. She continues arguing back saying there's no escape in death, and after cutting off her leg, Jay tries to convince V to join the winning team, to which she seemingly accepts, but rips off her arm right after. Right before the two can continue fighting, Uzi launches a black hole at the planet's core, which is disables the tendrils. Jay and V prepare to fight again, and Uzi and N land on a piece of the planet, which is when Sin finally reveals herself, destroying the black hole, which allows the tendrils to move again. Sin confronts N and Uzi as a thick fog starts to rise, and she uses a callback ping, which is essentially her trying to take control of Uzi again, but it doesn't work. So she resorts to the old-fashioned technique of cutting both her arms off and pushing her heart out of her own body. Holy shit! N launches himself at Sin before any more damage can be done to Uzi, but she teleports away, allowing for Uzi to use her arms to try and push her core back inside. Which I really want to emphasize how genuinely grotesque of a scene this is. She is choking on what is essentially her own blood while using her handless arms to put her heart back into herself. As Uzi is recovering, Sin rips off N's arm and pins him to the ground, and Uzi witnesses her digging into his body and ripping his head off. God damn! Having regenerated back her hand, she uses her solver powers to move some platforms and drags N's body into a building, to which Sin so happily witnesses. As Jay and V continue to fight, Jay takes back her offer for V to join her team and says she never needed her or N to begin with. Cold. As Uzi is dragging N through the hallways of the building, Sin is exploring as well, looking for the two and using her callback ping, but it doesn't work again. When N and Uzi are hiding from Sin in a different room, N is still mentally recovering from Sin ripping apart his chest because he remembers when it first originally happened to him and V when they were worker drones. Uzi holds N's hand, which helps him calm down, and Sin's voice starts to fade away, when suddenly a distant crash puts her, N, and Uzi on high alert. It's V as she calls out for N, wondering if he's okay, and says that Tessa was Sin and that she's in there, revealing that she actually knew about Tessa being dead the entire time. As N thinks about calling out to her, Uzi puts her hand over his mouth and wonders if it's a trap. V continues saying Jay tricked them, and that, quote, it tricked Jay too, presumably talking about the solver. V sees a hologram of N down the hallway and starts to apologize for not being honest to him, alluding she purposely kept this information from him because she was scared of what would happen to both her and him. An absolute fucking bombshell, revealing that she did care about N this entire time, and was only so secretive with some information to keep him safe in her eyes. As her voice gets closer and closer, the real N finally screams at her to stop, which results in his heart getting stabbed through his chest. Sin lets down the hologram disguise, and V witnesses her grabbing N's body. Sin tells her that she should have done her job, so she would leave her and N alone, proceeding to chase V from the building, leaving Uzi by herself. V tries to fly away, but she is kicked down by Jay, and Sin tosses N's body next to her. Sin has N's heart in her hand, and right as she's about to gobble it up, the door behind her cuts off her wings, causing her to fondle the heart, which jumps back right into N's chest. The cause of the door closing was none other than Khan. Holy shit, he's finally on his redemption arc! That throws Uzi's railgun, yelling at her to go long, but she's nowhere to be seen, and in a moment of annoyance, Sin goes in for the kill shot on V and N, but is stopped by Uzi. There she is. Uzi takes a second to appreciate that V isn't dead, and the two share mutual respect for once, finally being on good terms. Sin tries her callback ping move on Uzi, but once again, it does nothing. Instead, it seems that she's starting to get corrupted by her instead. She briefly talks about being free from the solver, which I'll talk about how she is later, but she retrieves both a pickaxe from Nori and her tail catches a railgun from before, which once again, Jay's visor briefly shows a prior hazard message. Love that detail. This is when the final fight begins, but before it does, Nori's iPod comes from above and starts playing an entire Metal Nightcore song made for this fight. What? Made by AJ Desprecio once again with vocals from Zefriana, this song is played in its entirety for the 3-minute fight scene, and oh my god, this song in the fight is easily the best part of this episode, and it's not even close. Everything about this song is genuinely so fucking good. The vocals, instrumental, guitar riff, it's just amazing. I'm not gonna sit here and talk about every single detail I like about this song like I'm Anthony Fantano, but the last thing I will say about the song itself is that the lyrics fit perfectly with Murder Drones, and more specifically, Uzi as a character. Which makes sense since it's literally called Bite Me. I can see why Nori was bumping this shit in the cathedral. This is awesome. When this song started playing, it immediately became the song that comes to your mind whenever you think of Murder Drones in general. Like, to me, Bite Me to Murder Drones is like what 115 is to Call of Duty Zombies, which I know is kind of a weird comparison, but it works. In fact, if this was released in the 2000s, I could see this song being used in Modern Warfare 2 montages. The song just fits the emo rock vibe perfectly. Okay, enough glazing the song, let's actually talk about what happens next. I'm not gonna cover the entire fight play by play like I'm a sports commentator, but what I will say is that the animation here is just insane. Like, I know I've mentioned how much I like the animation for this show in general before, but it really doesn't get better than this. Also, I want to mention the scene where Sin throws her sword at Uzi that just completely misses her and slices Jay's shit clean off. After some black hole throws, pickaxe sword duels, more hologram fuckery, V and N joining the battle, and more hype moments in Aura, Uzi is able to predict one of Sin's teleport moves, and she rips out her heart from her chest, evaporating it using a beam that cuts through all of Copper 9. Damn. After the heart is entirely gone, all that is left is a black hole that quickly swallows Uzi and Sin and turns everything around them monochrome, slowing down time. Inside the black hole, Sin uses the last of her energy to try and eat her core again, but Uzi beats her to the chase and she is left utterly dumbfounded. The black hole surrounding them disappears and Sin follows suit, melting into a pile of mush, leaving nothing but her bones. As Uzi starts to glitch from eating the core, she falls unconscious as N and V are running toward her. Shortly after, she does wake up from from a fatal error, and it seems that the planet has gone back to being somewhat normal, besides the fact that everything is red. Thad does an unnecessarily cool skateboard trick and helps Lizzie up from a ledge. Nora uses her solver powers to help Khan from falling, and then immediately runs away crying as Khan is confused. This is some smiling friends ass movement. Sparky emerges from the depths as well, driving the school bus, chasing Khan, Thad, and Lizzie around. N and V find Uzi but are taken back a sec after noticing that her eyes are now a purple-yellow gradient.
Oh, hell yeah! I'm a damaged OC.
As much as I cringe at this stupid fucking line, it is unfortunately very much in character for her, so I can't really complain too much. The scene cuts to Uzi presenting the entire event to her classroom, stating that they probably should have just stayed behind the doors and admitting she doesn't really hate Copper 9 that much. And unlike last presentation, she actually gets quite a few claps, even if they are still kind of freaked out. Oh yeah, they like found Doll's corpse and just moved it to the classroom for some reason. And shows off his new drawing skills to V thanks to a drawing guide, and Uzi shows off her new solver form to her classmates.
Also, now I can do this!
Wait, what? That's it? That's the entire ending? Well, not necessarily. In the credit scene, we get some more events that played out after the fight. All of Copper 9 now has a giant solver arrow in it. Jay is sadly alive and fixing the original landing pod to presumably get off of the planet. And Uzi, Khan, and Nori are playing cards with the WDF. And Uzi watch anime that looks a bit familiar. The school holds a funeral for Doll, even though it looks like nobody wants to be there. Also, Rachel's catching strays for no reason. Sparky, Lizzie, and V hang out, so I guess Sparky is their pet now. And for the final scene of the show, it's revealed that the solver is now a part of Uzi, but just in her tail, and she recommends wearing a bow. Okay, now that was the entire ending. Now, before I start to talk about this episode and get admittedly kinda heated about it, I think it would be better if I just moved this part to my criticisms of the show, and instead, I just moved on to talking about what the actual fuck we just watched. We are finally done with the entire recap of the show, so it's about time we get to the explanation and analysis, and to make sense of what Murder Drones is actually about and why the events in the show occurred, and tie it all back together. Before I get into explaining what happens when, what it actually means, and yada yada, I first want to shout out 3 other YouTubers and their videos that helped me piece together my own timeline of events. That being Cartoon Universe, Tyromaniac, and Blanterdang, which I need to specifically highlight his video because it was personally the one I found the most comprehensive and the timeline I agreed with the most. But I do think you should check out all these creators and their respective videos as they provide a unique perspective on the show's story. I also do want to clarify that while a lot of my explanations will be pretty similar to theirs, which, I mean, it's a show, it's not like a choose your own adventure book, there are some specific things that I interpreted differently, which, might I add, a lot of the explanations I'm going to give are going to be based on context clues because, spoiler alert, this show does not go into detail most of the time, which fucking sucks. Anyways, let's just get on with it already. Pre-pilot. So the timeline of Murder Drones can mostly be separated into 2 different categories, that being pre-pilot and post-pilot. Pre-pilot being everything that occurred prior to the events of the pilot episode, and the post-pilot being, well, you can probably guess. With the beginning of the pre-pilot, we need to first establish the company that is responsible for all of the events in the show. That obviously being JC Jensen. In space, ooh. This company is behind the creation of worker drones, duh, which are autonomous robots designed specifically for doing hard labor. And when you think about it, yeah, they're literally just slaves. There's not exactly a lot of information on the workers themselves, as in how they work and how much they cost, but it is safe to assume that they're available to be purchased by not just other companies, but for civilians as well, which is where I shall introduce the Elliott family, or the family that Tessa comes from. Now, if you couldn't tell, these guys are pretty loaded, so rich to the point that they have worker drones do everything for them. Despite that, however, they don't treat them very well. Whenever a worker drone slightly pisses them off, they immediately go straight to a landfill that they've garnered right outside their home, filled with hundreds, if not thousands, of thrown away worker drones. Now, besides this being super environmentally unfriendly, you'd think there wouldn't be an issue with this at all. However, that's obviously not the case. You see, JC Jensen has a very specific protocol when it comes to disassembling and throwing away worker drones, which we find out in episode 5 through the Zombie Drones VHS tape. They first need to have their software deleted, then core disconnected, and finally physically disassembled. If you don't follow these specific procedures, then there is around a 0.01% chance that a drone will reboot itself awake, which, while this isn't isn't that important, I thought I'd point this out. This percentage was apparently up to the date in the year 3020, which from my knowledge is the earliest date in the murder drones timeline. Of the 0.01% of self-rebooting drones, only around 0.7 of those go through potentially hazardous mutations, which if you remember from the episode 5 recap, I mentioned that is a 1 in 14,290,000 chance. This is exactly what happened to Sin, and we can see in this frame that right here before she was also rebooted, it seemed that the Absolute Solver had contacted her and asked for her permission to take control, which she agreed to. Now, a lot of you are probably really confused as to what the difference between Sin and the Absolute Solver really is, and the way I interpret the two is that Sin is merely just the host. Sin is the body of this worker drone, but the one that's actually responsible for her actions is the Absolute Solver, which I know still might be confusing to some of you, but I will get into this later. Now, because the Elliot family goes through so many worker drones and disposes of them improperly, Tessa, who's the only child in the Elliot family to my knowledge, likes to go through the disposed of drones to try and reawaken them, taking them in for herself, which is how J, V, and N came to be. Now, it's unsure for how long Tessa had Sin, but it's pretty obvious to see that Sin definitely started garnering a distaste for humans due to how they were treating the drones. So on the night of the Elliot family decided to host a gala where a bunch of humans would be in one place, this is when she would carry out her massacre, which she did warn Tessa about and was going to spare her, but since she got involved, she had to be taken out as well. Bummer. While this massacre was mostly done by herself, she did receive some sort of help as well. Before the gala massacre, we can see that Sin infected a lot of worker drones with the Absolute Solver by putting them in a fake error state. And you might be asking, how do you know this is fake, and how do you know this was the Solver's doing? And that's actually pretty simple, the visor color. You see, the Absolute Solver represents itself using yellow as its visor color, which is pretty evident in the entire series. But what a lot of people don't recognize is that in episode 5, a majority of the drones do not have yellow eyes. They're actually white.
Hey, so I just noticed this while editing. The other workers actually have light blue eyes, but N and V are the only ones that have white eyes, and that's probably due to them having been revived from the dead. So yeah, my bad.
Which, if you thought they were yellow, I really don't blame you at all, because the lighting really doesn't help. Upon becoming infected with the Solver, however, we can noticeably see that the visor colors of the drones are now yellow. Got that? Cool. Because Sin had previously infected a large amount of workers with the Solver, they were under its control, which we can see when the Gala massacre takes place. Various workers inside the room have their visors light up yellow, including Jay, who closes the door so no one is allowed to leave. This is where the beginning of the Earth's demise truly begins. Now, it's not stated when N, V, and J are turned into disassembly drones, but I'm going to say after the Gala massacre because it just ends up making more sense, because Jay is shown to be present during it and in her worker drone state. But before it occurred, it was made known to us that Sin was usually locked in the basement due to her acting strangely as a punishment, subsequently allowing her to start experimenting on perfecting the disassembly drone design, which looks like J, V, and N were the first characters to fall for this, which makes sense since Sin presumably liked them the most, as they were the only ones that kept their personalities. After the Gala massacre occurred, there are 4 events that happened right after. At some point in time, Sin must have raided JC Jensen's disassembly facilities, and while some of you may be asking, when the fuck did this happen? It didn't. But I make this assumption based on a single detail, that being the zombie drone's tape. When discussing the process of disposing of a worker drone, it mentions the cord being put through a disassembly unit, which based on this drawing, looks awfully familiar to their limbs. So this is where I conclude that Sin at some point must have gone to the disassembly facilities and destroyed everything for parts to create the disassembly drones. I swear when I was rewatching this series again, I saw this image and I mentally did that one Leonardo DiCaprio gif. After creating a bunch of disassembly drones, this is when Sin creates a null sphere that leads into the next event, the creation of a giant flesh pit on Earth in place where the Elliot Manor used to be. Looks a bit familiar, doesn't it? It's safe to say that this pit also leads to the core of the Earth from what we know of Copper 9, so just keep that in mind. Sometime after the creation of disassembly drones and Earth's mystery flesh pit, this is when Sin orders them to start wiping out all of humanity, as we see from N's flashback. And there are 2 notable things about this scene. The first being that these guys were fucking indestructible. Bullets from an attack helicopter were just bouncing off the wings of these robots. The second thing that is also very important to see is that there is a giant black hole present, which I'm assuming is yet another null sphere. So what does this mean? Now, once again, this is my interpretation of things, so if you think differently, that's completely fine. But what I think happened here is that this event was not actually the wiping of humanity. This was simply a test to see how effective the disassembly drones were at murdering things, and the null sphere in the background is what actually killed everyone on Earth by being thrown at the core and causing the planet to explode. explode. Because, I mean, when you really think about it, there was absolutely no need for Sin to order all the disassembly drones to individually kill everyone on the planet, when she could do it with one single null sphere, which is exactly what she did here. But of course, she wanted to see if her creations were good at what she wanted them to do, so she tested them, made sure they were perfect, then presumably put them in landing pods to be sent to outer space before then killing all of humanity by blowing the Earth up. But the thing is, she didn't kill all of humanity, at least not yet, and that's where we finally bring Copper 9 into the equation. While all of the murder and destruction was occurring on Earth, other humans that were on different planets at the time caught wind of what was happening, so they obviously wanted to stop it. Sin became aware of their plans to stop her and the Absolute Solver, so one by one, she took out their planets as well, which is why she was testing to see if the disassembly drones were successful at murdering, so she could command them to easily take out any threats with minimal effort if needed, and it was working out pretty well until it came time to deal with Copper 9. Because Copper 9 was focused on relatively late by Sin due to being further away from the Earth compared to the other planets, they were able to establish a set of labs that was specialized in researching the properties of the Absolute Solver, that obviously being cabin fever labs, and in the case of any threats, the humans would create the Sentinels, which were designed to attack any robot it saw. And as an extra layer of protection, the main experiments would be conducted even deeper underground in a cathedral, which, no idea why it's a cathedral, but whatever. Inside the cathedral, the humans would conduct experiments that involved giving various worker drones the Solver virus to see if they could replicate its powers to reverse engineer it. Every single attempt to do so failed except for 2 drones, that of course being Yeva and Nori, which was revealed to us from the list in the 7th episode. Through these successful infections, this allowed the humans to study the 2 enough to essentially create a sort of cure, that being the patch, aka the crucifix USB thing. However, this cure did still allow anyone infected to keep their powers, so that's cool. The first successful use of the patch was on Yeva, but upon trying to use it on Nori, things went south. Now, because the 2 were infected with the Absolute Solver, that meant that over time, the virus would eventually corrupt its host and be able to take total control. The use of the patch would completely prevent that. However, it seems they waited too long to use it on Nori because while they were in the middle of their ritual, Sin was able to take control of her and kill everyone in the cathedral, except of course for Mitchell, who was able to grab a hold of Yeva and successfully stab the patch into her. In the middle of Nori being under Sin's control, however, she would end up creating a flesh pit that would lead to the core of Copper 9, and right before she would be fully out of her control, Sin forcefully created a null sphere in her hand, causing Yeva to cut it off, which just so happened to fall into that flesh pit and cause a core collapse, causing the rest of the humans on the planet to become mere skeletons. Sounds a bit like something that happened back at home as well, albeit it didn't completely explode the entire planet, which I'm assuming the reason it didn't was because the null sphere was much smaller compared to the one on Earth. Also, it's kind of fucked that Mitchell got saved only for him to die moments later to the core collapse. Shucks. After all organic life on Copper 9 got 200 pumped, Yeva and Nori made their way out of the labs to the surface, just to see that the entire planet was now snowing asbestos. Which, yeah, according to Liam himself, this isn't real snow, which is honestly a detail I like. Either way, because of all the humans now being gone, the workers decide to form their own society. Nori and Yeva flocked to Camp 98.7, which is where Nori met Khan, and presumably where Yeva met her husband as well, although his name is never mentioned, so who knows.
If you ask me, Nori and Yeva should have dated. I'm trying to see some robot Yuri in this bitch.
Now, just because Yeva and Nori were free from the control of the Absolute Solver doesn't mean all of their problems were over. For you see, Sin really did not like the idea of the host having control of the Absolute Solver. So this is where the disassembly drones come in and start killing everyone in the hopes of wiping out anyone who is potentially a host of the Solver. Before the disassembly drones actually arrived, however, Nori had previous knowledge of this and instructed Khan to start building a bunker slash hideout with 3 strong doors that would keep the murder drones out. And some people may be asking, well, how did Nori know about their arrival before? And this is kind of a shot in the dark, but hear me out. I think the way Nori found out about the incoming arrival of the disassembly drones was through Sin herself. You see, when Sin had fully taken control over Nori, because they sort of became one being during that time, that would have also mean they would have shared their thoughts with each other during the possession. So Sin found out Nori was a host of the Solver for the sole purpose of figuring out how to defeat it, and Nori found out from Sin that she was gonna eventually raid Copper 9 to kill anyone that could be a potential host, hence the crazy drawings. Now, despite having built the bunker, Nori would still eventually be killed at the hands of a disassembly drone due to its nanite acid, with Khan having to mercy kill her. And while we don't know when this happened, Yeva and her husband would also be killed as well, with V actually being the one behind their deaths. Before Nori died, however, she and Khan would have Uzi, which you're still probably wondering how that works, and I will get into that later, but we are finally done with the pre-pilot timeline. Let's talk about the post-pilot. Post-pilot. Ever since she was conscious, Uzi had always hated the idea of having to hide behind a bunch of doors instead of doing something about the disassembly drone problem, and because of that, she's always had a sort of distant relationship with her father, Con Dorman, who ended up being way too focused on doors anyway, so it was kind of a two-way thing, even though it was originally Nori's idea to build the doors. Never having fit in with her classmates and just being generally looked down upon by mostly everyone, Uzi decides to build a railgun and goes outside the doors to fulfill her desire to be the one that frees the workers from the disassembly drones. Taking her first shot at a disassembly drone using her railgun, it works, but also doesn't because the drone just regenerates its head back using its absolute solver powers. And of course, this drone would be none other than N, who would end up helping Uzi later on. And by later on, I mean like 15 minutes later when he captures V and Uzi temporarily kills J. And at the end of the pilot episode, the absolute solver code is enabled within Uzi. And we finally came full circle, baby. But not yet, because you're also probably wondering how Uzi even had the solver code within her. Which, this is finally where I talk about how worker drones having kids is even possible, which is also going to derail the timeline explanation a bit, but this is important, so yeah. In the beginning of the pilot, we see a worker drone couple holding what looks to be a drone baby, which is correct, but if we want to be more specific, this is a UNN, or an untrained neural network, and how they work is basically some code from parent 1 and parent 2 will be combined into the UNN, which is their equivalent to DNA. Do you see where I'm going with this? When Nori shared her part of the code to the UNN that would become Uzi, she also gave not just a part of the absolute solver code, but part of the patch as well, which explains why she was able to generally be in control of her solver powers most of the time. And this would also apply to Doll as well, since Yeva also had the patch and absolute solver code. Also, I should probably explain what the point of a UNN is besides just allowing worker drones to have kids. Essentially what they are for is to observe a certain task or action so they know what to do. And after enough visual training, their conscious is then transferred into a real worker body. Or at least, that's what I gathered from the Cartoon Universe video, and it makes the most sense, so we're going with it. Thanks, Haley. This would also explain how Uzi is able to do those crazy fighting moves, because she watched a bunch of pirated anime, so she learned visually from that. And I think that's a really funny detail, but it really sucks that it isn't explained well at all. Anyways, Worker Drone Anatomy 101 is over, let's go back to the timeline. Despite having had her upper torso be completely eviscerated, Jay's core survived, which I think is a good time to tell you what the difference between worker and disassembly drones is when it comes to their cores. When it comes to workers, they're a lot like humans when talking about how much damage they sustain. You rip off their head and they die instantly. No coming back from that. But with disassembly drones, it's a lot more complicated. The head isn't what keeps disassembly drones from dying. Like, yeah, obviously they won't function without it, but their actual mind is more so their core, as we see from the second episode when Eldritch J is defeated and with Nori's core. Normally, when a drone with solver powers loses a body part, they are able to manipulate matter from an internal source to essentially regenerate it out of nowhere. But because J was just the core, she was low on materials, which required her to find things around her to consume and regenerate manually. So of course, she decided to start slow and then immediately step it up to murdering worker drones. When N did kill J's core, however, it created a weird black hole that floated away. Remember when I explained that all the way back in my episode 2 recap? Well, this is where I finally explain what it is. So apparently, this is the actual soul of the drone, but it lays dormant as the solver is controlling the core itself, unless you're Nori who's free of solver possession. And before you ask where my evidence for this is, we'll get to that. Upon defeating Eldritch J, N and Uzi decided that they should probably investigate more into what the absolute solver is, because N has it, V has it, J had it, and Uzi does now too, so it would probably be a good idea to figure that out. Oh yeah, Doll has it too, but she's going lone wolf instead of working with the other three because she doesn't want to work with V, which makes sense since she killed her parents, but when she found out that Uzi also had it, she vowed that when she would find the cure for herself, she would give it to Uzi as well. So they were kinda on good terms, but not really. Fast forwarding ahead a little bit, Jay comes back alive because Sid had cloned her body and her conscious floated away, and Tessa arrives on the planet as well. Uzi, N, and V make their way to Camp 98.7 where Nori and Khan met, which is where Uzi finds the key bug that will help them get into Cabin Fever Labs. During this trip, however, Uzi's need for oil starts to overpower her, being the first real sign that the absolute solver is starting to take over, eventually resulting in her first solver form and killing a bunch of her classmates. I'm not really sure what state she was in when she was on this rampage, because on one hand, this was caused by the absolute solver starting to gain more control, but on the other hand, it wasn't a full-on possession like we would see in the later episodes. It's kind of a weird mix in between that we just never see again. But N does snap her out of it, and all's well that ends well. Except those students can't really say the same, so fuck. An unspecified time after the trip to Camp 98.7, N and V both end up in an error state due to Sin trying to delete their memories. And if you paid very close attention, you notice that the error here, error 606, is actually what is used to shut down worker drones properly according to the zombie drones VHS tape. Uzi ends up hacking into both N and V's minds, stopping Sin from deleting their memories, and locks her out of administrator perms for both of them. And you're probably wondering how the hell she did this and where's my proof, which okay, so I don't know how she did it, but in episode 7, when Sin tries to gain control of N again, we see for a split second a pop-up on his visor showing that Uzi is the new administrator for N, so I'm assuming the same was done for V2. Doll meets up with Jay and Tessa shortly after taking the key bug from Uzi as the three agree to explore the lab so they can find the patch, Doll wanting to use it on herself and Tessa wanting to help destroy the solver in general, which obviously we know now is bullshit. She wanted that thing gone. Envy and Uzi show up and Jay and Tessa decide they should tag along, but Doll obviously doesn't like that and takes the key bug back, leading them to chase after her, except for Jay because she just gets sidelined again. After dealing with Alice, Bo, and the Sentinels, Uzi starts to show more signs of being under solver influence, and because of this, Tessa wants N to mercy kill Uzi eventually, which we now know was just to get rid of Sin's competition. N, Uzi, and Tessa eventually follow Doll to go down to the cathedral after V sacrifices herself to fight off the Sentinels, and after crashing down, Uzi catches on that Tessa wants her dead, so she runs away. She does end up finding the cathedral, but this is where she learns the truth about her mom, which, you know, obviously freaks her out, but before she has any time to really process what she just witnessed, Doll uses the last of her strength to walk in and drop dead in front of her, telling Uzi to fight back. As we know, she was killed by Sin/Tessa after catching her destroying the files of who the patch worked on which drones. While this was happening, Sin tried to kill N to use one of her other clones of him since she didn't have admin perms anymore on this one, but Nori comes in and stops her, because Khan didn't know about the fact that cores affected by the Absolute Solver were still able to survive without a body, so she's just been hiding in the cathedral the entire time looking for the patch, which she did just conveniently finally find. And what do you know, this patch will prevent the solver from possessing you and you don't have to die. Tessa, you fucking liar, you fucking piece of shit little fucking rat. When N asks Tessa if she knew about this patch and she tries to avoid the question, he slices that shit schmoove off and goes to comfort Uzi, who is inconveniently now fully possessed by the solver, and she destroys the patch. After a little clash with N and her own mom, she snaps out of it because N confesses to Nori that she's got feelings for Uzi, and Nori slaps the shit out of her for dating something that killed her mom. Now that Uzi was back, Sin decided to use Tessa's body again and goes full mask off, or more like a spacesuit off, as she reveals to both N and Uzi that she's wearing the actual skin of Tessa. Which, by the way, I just want to point out a detail from episode 5 that if you catched, you could have actually predicted this. In episode 5, while Sin is failing to pick up a scalpel to get rid of N's memories, if you turn your volume way up and listen very carefully, you can actually hear Tessa not only calling out for her dad, but also sobbing as well. The sobbing is so distinct that even when I first had it pointed out to me, it took me a while to be able to hear it, but it is there. And that is such an insanely cool fucking detail. Very sad and horrifying, obviously, but cool nonetheless. Also, shout out to Kiro_plays for being the one I found this out from, because I was like randomly doom scrolling on TikTok and just saw this, and I just had to go back and verify if this was legit, and it was, so awesome. Anyways, Sin reveals herself to the two, and it makes a lot of sense now why Tessa wanted to kill Uzi, because she saw her as a threat. One ass beating later, and Uzi chooses to sacrifice herself to save N, only for the entire planet to fucking explode and everyone ends up in outer space. Uzi realizes the weird hard thing she kicked into the flesh hole was her mom, and the two talk about how they can beat Sin, and Nori tells her the only way to do so is by destroying the core. So they do exactly that. 1v comeback, cool 1v1 between robot girls, and Nightcore fight later, Uzi predicts Sin and rips her core out, burning it to a crisp but still leaving the black hole thingy. Sin, body somehow still moving, tries to eat her conscience, but Uzi beats her to it, which finally kills her. And this right here is my proof that this is the actual soul to the solver infected drones. Hope you remember that from the first part of my post-pilot explanation. This exact scenario, you see what I did there, is exactly what she feared of happening if another drone with the absolute solver was left alive. She thought that one would be able to overpower her and keep her as a prisoner, which is literally what happened, as we see that she is now Uzi's tail with the conscience. Uzi is basically Sin's forever prison now. If I had to guess how this works without her getting possessed, it's most likely because there can't exactly be two hosts in one form, so Sin gets the lesser one, that being her tail. As for how she was able to just eat Sin's conscience without like imploding or something, I'm gonna guess it's because she had built up an immunity to the absolute solver at that point. And if you're wondering, well, how did she do that without the patch? I have no idea. At least one that isn't concrete, but I have a theory. I'm guessing the patch that she inherited from Nori in the first place along with the Absolute Solver started to build up immunity over time. The more time she got possessed and snapped out of it, the more the patch started to complete itself. It's kind of like when people say you shouldn't wash the dirt off of strawberries because the germs will help build your immune system, which I actually have no idea if that's real, but you get what I mean. After Sin just melts away and Uzi is knocked out for a bit, you see that Copper 9 has sort of put itself together because Sin is no longer behind the planet exploding with her tendril thingies. Uzi now has to live with Sin as her tail, she and N are officially a thing, and N and V are chilling with all the workers now. All the while Doll is just dead forever. So there it is, an explanation to all of Murder Drones because geez, it can get quite confusing. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya! Wait, I forgot I need to criticize the show. 57 pages, 24,000 words, 130,360 characters, and an hour and 52 minutes of raw audio later, we are finally at the part of the video that is the main reason you probably even clicked on it in the first place. Yeah, sorry it took so long, but I needed you all to be caught up to speed, but I just didn't want to rush through everything and miss out on a lot of key details that would become essential in the discussion of this section. I hope I didn't seem like I pulled the classic video essay trick of, here's a thing and I will explain everything and analyze it and give it a unique perspective, and it just ends up being a recap video, which, yeah, this was a shit ton of recap, but like I said, it was for a reason. Now, before I start with the actual detailed criticisms of the show itself, let me first split up my talking points into three main categories: the coherence / understanding of the show, the many plot holes present throughout the show, and then just some general gripes I have that didn't fit with the other two categories. Some of these might bleed into each other because, being quite honest, I'm not the greatest at keeping one type of critique in a single section because I'm the type to just talk about something as soon as it appears in my mind, but I'll try my best. One of the main criticisms against Murder Drones that has been prevalent essentially ever since its first couple episodes is that it is extremely confusing and just hard to understand. Despite me having just explained the show for you all, I completely agree with this 110%. There are various reasons as to why this show is so unnecessarily complex, but I think it mostly comes down to one technique the show utilizes horribly: show don't tell. Show don't tell is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of flat out stating plot components to the reader, you tell it to them visually. Whether it be a character silently reading an article that explains prior events, the background showcasing the current setting the characters are in, or even as something as little as objects that are showcased, it is a very effective storytelling technique that can elevate the plot or certain characters, sometimes better than verbal means. That is, if it's done correctly. And to be quite frank with you, God, this show does it horribly. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think there are some scenes where it is done well, like at the end of the pilot episode where Uzi's eye glitches out and has the Absolute Solver code activate within her. But there are just so many other times where it fails. And before you ask, I will be bringing up examples and highlighting why they are bad when it comes to visual storytelling. One of the first and most glaring failures is the error message that is laser etched into the containers in episode 2, which is ironic because it is one of the ones that is actually able to give information in a decently quick manner. But the way it gives that information completely defeats the purpose of it being visual. When it is first etched into the containers, we cannot see the specifics of the error, which is whatever since Uzi, Thad, and N eventually come across it. But when they find it, not only can we still barely see it because it's blurry as shit, but Uzi just ends up flat out reading it out loud and is able to just perfectly pinpoint what this error is in one of the Absolute Solver's abilities without any prior knowledge. And I know I did previously point this out before, but I'm bringing it up again. This defeats the entire purpose of being show not tell, and it just pisses me off because of the fact that not only does Uzi just explain it to the viewers, but the original visual can't even be seen very well and barely has 8 seconds of screen time, 2 of those being blocked by Uzi's big ass head. Now I can see the comments already. Oh, Kip, you're nitpicking. Kip, this really doesn't matter at all. Kip, this is not that important. And sure, this is nitpicking. In the grand scheme of things, this single detail is probably whatever. But shit like this adds up in the long run, and I can see that when it comes to the long run itself. Problems like this continue to persist throughout the show. Doll getting the error message after not being able to attack Uzi, the flashback and experiences after touching the zombie drones tape, the pie chart in the zombie drones tape, the pop-up question that appears
on Sin's visor. These are just a handful of scenes that I think could have been executed so much better, but instead the details that they give to help build the world or provide more lore are just shown for a split second, and it's one of those blink and you'll miss it type moments. Which, don't get me wrong, I do think it's okay to have hidden details like that, but when the details you're hiding from a majority of the viewers are the ones that would also help them understand the story, that's just not helpful whatsoever and leads to unnecessary discussions that could have been avoided had the show been more clear. I hope there isn't an extremely popular video game franchise that I also like that has the exact same problem. Doll's error message fails as a visual showcase of why her powers don't work on Uzi because it not only shows up for around a second, but is immediately then just shown to the viewer that, yeah, Uzi has solver powers. But even then, to most people watching, they're still gonna wonder why they didn't work. The flashback and experiences is too short and flashy for most people to connect it back to the Elliot Manor, even after watching episode 5, and genuinely it would have just been better to include it in episode 5 later on. The zombie drones tape is genuinely horrible when it comes to explaining things on a first time watch because you're just not able to take in all the information it throws you in this short period of time, and once again, this stupid fucking pie chart is only intelligible for 7 frames, which, funny enough, the absolute solver's proposition it asks Sin if she wants to be brought back to life or not is also readable for 7 frames as well. And to all of you not particularly hardcore but more than average fans of the show out there, I know you're probably screaming at me that the solution to this is that you should just go back and pause to read or examine the scene, but to me that just defeats the entire purpose of being show don't tell. You should be able to comprehend these story elements without having to pause and go back to study it like it's a school assignment. There were definitely ways for the show to be able to tell the viewer that this floating black hole is Jay's conscience, or the fact that the reason why all of the drones in episode 5 were experiencing an error was because Sin infected them with the absolute solver. And like I said before, some of these details are something you will miss if you do so much as blink at the wrong time, which isn't good when these details are important to the overall story. Other than the visual storytelling being pretty bad, which is ironic considering the visual gags are honestly quite funny, this show just has an insane pacing problem, which really was inevitable from the fact that it's less than 3 hours worth of content divided into 8 episodes, which really doesn't give a whole lot of leeway for further explaining the finer details of the story, which will be my next point of why this show is so damn confusing to most viewers. Weirdly enough, the pilot episode is the longest one out of them all, which sure does make sense to an extent as it is the one that sets up a lot of what's to come, but a majority of the information that is supposed to stick with us for the entire series is given during the first 2 minutes of the episode during Uzi's exposition presentation. The rest of the episodes are also just so bad at explaining why what's happening and it happens in the first place, or if it is explained, it's insanely rushed. The most prominent example of this happening in the show is episode 4, which, like I said, is one of my favorites in the entire series, but I have to say the introduction to it is just awful. Episode 3 ends with Doll promising to help Uzi if she finds what she's looking for, which at this point neither Uzi or us the viewer know what she's even looking for, and also the return of Jay and the introduction of Tessa into the current storyline, which episode 4 starts by sidelining all of that, showing off some place we have never seen before, followed by Uzi and all of her classmates, which just leaves the viewer wondering why are any of them there at this place we have never heard of. There was literally no build up to this, but right after we get a short flashback of Khan literally telling fuck all to Uzi besides showing her some photos of Nori and him being at the camp, and then giving Uzi a necklace that she was already wearing, like she is literally wearing it in the flashback scene. I seriously don't get why there wasn't just a bit of exposition before this episode, as it would have made it not only less confusing but more coherent in general. Like, picture this. Wouldn't it have been so much better if this episode started with Uzi barging into Khan's room asking for answers about Nori, he shows her the photos and actually explains why they were there instead of just saying that she's hot. Uzi notices the necklace on Nori and Yeva's neck both have the same pendant. She demands to go there, Khan obliges but does it in the most annoying way by making it a field trip for her class to go on, to which Mr. Vicker agrees because he doesn't feel like doing any actual work since he didn't get a bonus. Now that's just some alternate intro that I came up with in like 2 minutes. If you think that's trash, that's fine, but my point still stands. The pacing between each of the events in episodes is just horrible and adds to the confusion of being able to understand the story. Like between episode 4 and 5, episode 4 ends with the field trip itself coming to an end and Uzi seemingly becoming more like a disassembly drone, which scares N as he looks at the zombie drone's tape. Episode 5 starts off with the contents of said tape, which is fair enough. That's actually a good connection between the episodes. But after the VHS tape is over, it cuts to what ends up being most of the episode. A flashback sequence for N and V. What the fuck was the build up to this? A whole 7 minutes after the episode starts do we see that Uzi is somehow present in this flashback, and almost 2 minutes after that we find out she's hacked into both V and N's memories.
Wait, what the fuck? Keep in mind, in the span of 2 episodes, we went from a campgrounds massacre caused by Uzi losing herself to the absolute solver to her hacking into N and V to save their memories. Where was the build up to this? How does Uzi even know how to fucking do that? Context is just a concept in the show most of the time, and you're really just thrown face first into the concrete and asked to pick yourself up as if you don't have 15 broken teeth. Everything just goes by so fast, and it feels like you're not even allowed to take in what's going on the screen before boom, another detail you need to think about that might not actually be currently connected to anything right now, but will be related to something else later in the show, that is if you even catch that detail. I think the thing that pisses me off the most is that a majority of the issues about the coherence of the show could have been resolved if the episodes were just longer. Like, just think about it. If each episode was more so around 25 to 35 minutes long, that's more than enough time to add more context to the story in a way that feels natural. Episode 2 could have expanded upon how the absolute solver takes the matter from the worker drones it killed and uses it to create more body parts for itself. Episode 3 could have fleshed out Doll more as a character, especially since she's the antagonist of that episode and it's where she gets her real introduction aside from episode 2, where she's kept mysterious intentionally. Episode 4 should have had so much more lore about Camp 98.7 itself, because literally, why were Nori and Khan there? What happened previously in the camp? Why is the key bug there? Why the fuck is a key bug even a thing? I think you get the point by now. The show would have benefited heavily from longer episodes, which I know is a statement a lot of people share, but it's for a good reason. Which also brings me to my second major point that people also tend to share when it comes to the criticisms about this show is the plot holes. Oh god, the plot holes. Now, this section is literally just going to be me pointing out a lot of plot holes I have noticed after rewatching the show. Keep in mind that I don't think a lot of these are too big of a deal, but it is something that mildly irritates me. Also, while we're talking about plot holes, I will also be pointing out plot points that just straight up do not make any sense and seem like lazy writing, to me at least. You got that? Alright, let's go. In the first episode after Uzi blows N's head off, he doesn't remember a single thing in the past 3 hours and his optical sensors are bugged, not allowing him to see Uzi's actual body, which never happens again in the series whenever he's decapitated. Uzi somehow sneaks past both V and J when they are right inside the corpse spire, and when Uzi gets back inside the base, the doors just close way slower just for N to hold it open, which by the way is kinda lame. I think it would have been so much better if he flew in between the doors while they were closing and then stabbed the lock so the door opened, because it keeps the door moving speed consistent, and it also would have been fucking cool. This one is sort of a plot hole, but also just me being genuinely confused. When N stabs Uzi with his wing and then throws her aside, later she gets up as if nothing happened. Like, does losing oil just not matter? And how is there not a big gash in her? This one is really small, but I just wanted to point it out because I noticed it even on my first time watching, and that's when Jay starts shooting her arm gun. Not only do the shell casings come out of the front of the barrel, which is just not how an MP5 works, it also ejects 5.56 casings instead of 10 mil. When Jay takes the pen out from her visor, she uses an EMP attack on Uzi, which very shortly knocks her out. This attack is never used again, and it really makes me wonder why N or V didn't use this on the Sentinels. After N and Uzi successfully capture V, they literally just bust out of the hideout through the roof, which really makes me wonder why didn't they just do that in the first place if it's that easy to break? Like, you're telling me none of them tried any other way besides the 3 doors? Seeing it from episode 2, the roof looks so thin. The rest of episode 2 is mostly fine except for when Thad gets captured. Why he didn't just immediately die there genuinely baffles me. Guess he took a bit of Uzi's plot armor when she wasn't looking. Also, Khan just seeing N scurry away and not really doing anything is fucking insane. Those things literally have been killing you for years. Why are you not freaking out about it being inside your base? Episode 3, 4, and 5 honestly didn't have that many plot holes that I noticed, at least during my rewatch, but I do want to point out that episode 4 is the last time the nanite acid within the disassembly drone tails are ever utilized, which is really dumb because they were barely utilized in the first place. It was mentioned as to how Nori died in episode 1, used a bit in the same episode, then N stabs Jay's core with his tail a few times, and that's it. Speaking of which, those tails would have really come in handy for both N and V if they had actually used them. They can control those tails, and the fact they didn't just use them to cut the restraints in episode 6 is really dumb to me, but I guess you could chalk it up to the magnets preventing them from using their tails. But that still doesn't explain why N didn't use his tail to cut a hole in the elevator instead of letting Uzi become uncontrollable. Also, once again, Jay just getting immediately dispatched away was so fucking stupid. I know this isn't a plot hole, but it's just such a dogshit story decision, it might as well be. Episode 7 honestly didn't really have any plot holes, which is great. So that basically ends that. Woohoo! Now, I know I sort of exaggerated how much of an issue these plot holes are, but when I think about it, I don't think it's really about the plot holes themselves. It's more so that when they're combined with a story that's already really confusing at a first glance, it further amplifies the confusion and it makes it really inconsistent narratively. Also because they aren't filled in at all. You'd think they would remember something as simple as the disassembly drones having nanite acid tails and utilizing that in more than a handful of scenes throughout 3 episodes, or the WDF actually doing something relevant in the story besides dying and letting N and Uzi inside. Which I bet you completely forgot the WDF was even a fucking thing in this show. Speaking of which, I think now is the time that I start moving from plot holes to just general problems I have with the show. None of these are going to be in any specific order. I just want to yap about gripes I have from here on out, so I do apologize if I repeat certain things or just kind of drag on other topics for a bit. But these will range from minor annoyances to major issues in my eyes. I'm going to be starting with a pretty large complaint. It is that I really don't like how inconsistent the tone of the show is, because it really is just all over the place. And you're probably wondering what I mean by that and if I could give some examples, which I gladly will. The show constantly goes from having a really serious mood where it feels like everything is at stake, which is complemented with this creepy dystopian setting that feels like time just froze because of the fact that all humans were wiped off the face of the planet. But then it will immediately start treating everything as a joke, and it pisses me off because it feels like the show is laughing at itself and not taking things seriously. Don't get me wrong, I don't think this show should be completely serious 100% of the time with no jokes or gags, but the jokes are just implemented at the worst times and rarely any of them land. It also doesn't help that a lot of the plot points in the show are jokes, and getting let back inside the hideout despite literally having killed 4 drones not even like a day or 2 later is just insane. And not to mention, why aren't any of the other workers scared to death by them? This is a plot hole I failed to mention before because I thought it would be better to mention here, but it is actually insane to me. Basically, none of the workers are actually afraid of the disassembly drones past episode 1, despite them literally killing over tens of thousands of worker drones. And this WDF worker just letting N inside because he wrote an "I'm sorry" note is insane. Like, it would have made way more sense if that went inside normally, but Uzi and N had to sneak in by flying through the hole he originally made. Another joke plot point that just drives me crazy is in episode 5 when Tessa and Jay confront Sin at the gala, and literally all she does is shoot a bullet at her, which is immediately deflected, throw her gun at her when she had 5 bullets left, and then start throwing random glasses until she just kills everyone. Like, you're really telling me nobody else in that room was freaking out until Sin started murdering everyone? It sucks that this is basically played off as a joke, because I really feel like there could have been something of substance that could have happened here. Like, maybe Jay and Tessa could have gotten into an actual fight with Sin, but Sin ends up controlling Jay, so it ends up becoming a 1v2 that involves Tessa having to use the sword instead of the revolver. But instead, we get a scene that showcases there was really no form of struggle or any genuine resistance from Tessa other than the joke. The same thing happens in episode 7 when N and Nori are fighting Uzi, who's been fully possessed by the Absolute Solver, and of course, right before Nori gets killed by Uzi, N's super funny, genius idea of telling Nori that he was sort of taking Uzi out works, causing her to stop in her tracks and let her guard down, which Nori proceeds to slap the possession out of her, which is genuinely just such a lame way to stop an awesome fight. Not to mention that Nori already slapped Uzi, but for some reason did it way weaker than before. Like, if getting bitch slapped was really the way to stop possession, which is honestly really fucking lame to be honest, why didn't she full force it here? It's plot points like these that I absolutely despise, not because I think the idea itself is bad or anything, but the execution is just awful. And had these scenes been different, not only would they have been more impactful, but also seen in a more serious light. And that transitions well into my other talking point about how this show handles death. Very much like its tone, the way Murder Drones handles death is really inconsistent and honestly negatively impacts my view on the world building of the show. When the first deaths of the show occur that aren't from flashbacks when N gets past the first door, it's treated as a terrifying event as Uzi runs for her life, and when she looks behind her, she sees that nobody else made it out alive, and that shocks both her and Khan. In episode 2, while it is done as a joke, when Tim walks over to the hologram drone and gets murdered, there's still a sense of terror there as he's turned into nothing but a puddle of oil and a projection. This trend continues into episode 3, where the students are screaming and running for their lives during prom as Doll is killing any of them getting in her way. But by episode 4, all of a sudden they just stopped caring heavily. V shoots a worker drone simply for not responding to N's attendance call out, Uzi comes across a corpse in the floorboard but doesn't bat an eye, and probably the worst case of this happening, a random worker drone kills another random worker drone for literally no reason besides it being for a shock joke, but none of the other workers care. That was one of your classmates for years, how do you not care? By this point, the show stops treating murder and death as something that's horrifying or a threat and uses it for laughs, which, like I said, I'm not opposed to these jokes at all. I mean, the show is literally called Murder Drones, but these types of jokes just fuck up the mood and really prevent deaths of characters feeling significant in any meaningful way. Even if they are just background or no-name characters, their deaths should have impact. It's a death. From episode 4 onward, the show continues to mostly treat death as more of a minor inconvenience than anything, and even when there is a major death of a character apart from the main cast, Doll, it feels weirdly underwhelming. And I really think that has to do with the show almost refusing to kill off named characters, and in this instance for Doll, it not only felt inevitable, but its execution was also very lacking. When Doll first confronts Tessa, she looks like she's going to give a pretty good fight until she completely lets her guard down by allowing Tessa to cut her eye patch and knock the knife out from her hand, or she instead just stands there in fear in the darkness until Sin kills her, which is really just such a waste of her character. I'm not saying she had to survive, but Doll to me came off as someone who is a survivalist. She tried to do things mostly by herself for better or worse, but she was capable, being able to take things into her own hands and outsmart the main group. But here she's shown to be weak, and worst of all, we don't even know the specifics of her death. Did she give up a fight or was she instantly killed? We don't know, and we probably won't ever know, and the only real conclusion we get to her character is that her heart was ripped out and she used her last moments to warn Uzi, which while it did show that she did still care about Uzi in a way, it most likely wouldn't have changed anything as we know Tessa was going to attack her either way. It really sucks that Doll's death turned out to be so lackluster because I also happen to find it to be a moment of the show that actually fits the tone it's going for. There's no jokes, no visual gags, or anything that's supposed to be even remotely funny, and it sadly goes all to waste due to its poor execution. Which, on that note, I think it's about time I finally talk about the thing that disappoints me the most about this show. And if you have a keen eye, it's something that I've been avoiding about talking in this entire segment until now. And that's... absolute end. More like an absolute waste of my fucking time! Okay, obviously I'm over-exaggerating here. I still like this episode overall. I just personally think it's really shit in terms of being a finale for the entire show. We got that? Okay, cool. It has every single issue that I previously mentioned when critiquing the other episodes, and then some. So I'm not going to waste more of your time. Let's get into why I think Absolute End is such a bad finale from start to finish. As the episode starts, we get some pre-exposition to what happened after the ending of episode 7. And the reason why I'm saying it in that tone is because this literally explains nothing and is only used as a joke between Mr. Vicker and one of Sin's glowing tendrils. You could argue that this could explain how Uzi got blasted into space as the entire planet essentially blows up, but it isn't explained how Uzi survives it. She was barreling toward the planet's core right as it was about to explode, and logically, you'd think that would kill her, but it doesn't. What's even more confusing here is when N comes out of nowhere and saves Uzi using the landing pod, which just opens up so many questions. Where the fuck did he get this landing pod from? It's implied that he stole it from J because she's sitting grumpily with an IOU from N, but that doesn't make any sense because Uzi used the keys to cut off N's leg to save him. So he wouldn't have been able to start the pod without the keys. There's a destroyed landing pod right next to Jay where she landed. It can't be from the original Spire because in the credits we see Jay trying to repair it. So where the fuck did he get this? Not to mention, how does he know how to pilot it? We know from episode 2 that yes, N was a pilot, but not only does he not remember anything about that, he presumably wasn't a good one because he crashed the pod, making it unusable. So unless he just got back his memories conveniently right at that moment, this is just some bullshit. Also, how did he get to it so fast? There's absolutely no fucking way he made it from all the way down from the cathedral back to the elevator entrance, which was blocked anyways, somehow got rid of all of the rocks and made his way back up, got past the sentinels and not CV, then make his way from the cabin fever labs up to the surface, find a pod and get it running in the time that Uzi was falling and the entire planet blew up. And even if by some fucking god-given miracle he was able to do all of that, how did he know where Uzi was? In fact, how did he even know Uzi was alive? For all he knew, at the end of episode 7, she was fucking dead. There was no time to process what happened before she booted N out of the cathedral. And the fact he's just all giddy to see Uzi instead of being deathly relieved makes this reunion retrospectively worse because it's like he wasn't even worried at all and knew she would be alive, when we obviously know this wasn't the case. I know that this is supposed to be a joke, but it is just a horribly placed one that isn't even funny. This scene would have benefited so much more from a serious tone. It would have been more heartfelt, and maybe N and Uzi could have had their special moment here. Which, oh my fucking god, don't get me started on the Newsy confirmation scene. Now, don't get it twisted. I'm a Newsy truther, and I wouldn't have it any other way, but holy fuck was this scene just so poorly written and a hard watch. For starters,
We're, like, dating. right?
Oh my god, shut the fuck up! Who talks like that? Uzi, I know your entire thing is like 2000s emo cringe culture, but seriously, why the fuck would you say it like that? Not to mention the fact that at the end of their little confession toward each other, they don't even kiss, they just hug. It's like, did the people writing this want this to be the most lame confession scene ever? Like, this scene pissed me off so fucking badly, I went ahead and wrote my own scene that I personally think would have been miles better. Just picture this. As Uzi is barreling toward the planet's core, she notices that N is quite the distance away from her, but can still see through the flames that he's trying to say something. Uzi yells back at him, "What?" as she's doing a swimming motion to try and get closer. N is doing the same, but with one hand, as he's using his other as a sort of voice amplifier, to no avail. And it's not until they finally get a hold of each other by interlocking fingers that they can finally hear what they're saying. "Sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying on the account of falling toward our deaths and all," Uzi says to N. His visor shows a slight blush near his eyes as he replies, "Yeah, no, I get that. I just want to tell you that if you or me or either of us don't make it out alive, I just want to say I love you." Uzi's visor has a much brighter and visible blush as well, and N takes notice. She stammers for a bit. "Oh, before she clears her throat and looks N's in the eyes. "I love you too." She puts her left hand on N's face and then pulls in Uzi by the waist. As she locks her legs around N's torso, the two share a kiss while they plummet to the danger below them. You know, I never thought I'd get so pissed off at a scene it would cause me to write fanfiction for the first time in my life. Now, if you think my writing is complete garbage, that's fine, but I hope I was at least able to put a picture in your mind of what I was trying to go for, which I really wish actually happened in the show, but alas, we are here, and I can do nothing but complain and criticize. Speaking of which, how are they not dead here? This is probably one of the show's biggest plot holes that is constantly brought up mostly as a joke, but it is a plot hole nonetheless. It really makes no fucking sense that N and Uzi don't die here other than, well, they're obviously main characters. Because it was a plot point that Uzi was starting to react negatively to sunlight as it started to cause her to overheat. But this scene really just says, fuck that, let's have them exposed both to the sun and potentially 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which, if you're wondering, is the temperature NASA considers spacecraft should be able to withstand if they are to re-enter Earth's atmosphere. Might be more or less on Copper 9, but we don't know that. Moving on from the confession scene, which, yeah, I definitely got way too heated about, I really want to talk about V's comeback because there's really a lot to say about it. Right off the rip, there is no explanation as to how she survived the Sentinels' attack, and that is like the definition of lazy writing. You can't just have one of your episodes be a cliffhanger of a main character sacrificing themselves just for it to be a fake out only 2 episodes later and not explain how they survived. I mean, you can, because clearly they did it right here, but it's not good writing. It's also insanely random that V all of a sudden tamed one of them, and that's entirely glossed over as well. All we know about the Sentinels is that they were built to kill any type of drone and were very effective at doing so. So V having been able to tame one without any explanation on how she did so pisses me off so much. Do y'all got any good writing? We got high moments in Aura. Oh fuck, this show really might just be ass after all. And also hot robots. V surviving also makes the sacrifice scene in episode 6 just worse retrospectively because it's such an emotional scene that ultimately served no purpose and is only really effective on your first time watch, with the scene losing all of its impact on any rewatches. Not to mention that the scene in general was kind of dumb because she could have just jumped on top of the elevator and covered her visor with her arms after slicing the cables, but that's beside the point. I honestly wouldn't have mind if episode 6 was where she actually died because that would have been a great close to her character arc. She originally disliked N and Uzi and wanted to stop pursuing any leads to what the absolute solver is, but this scene would have been a complete redemption to her character as she uses her last moments to save the both of them because she not only cares about them but believes in their cause, which she was originally against. That being said, I do get why the show chose to keep her alive, but I really can't say the same for these two. Thad and Lizzie genuinely do absolutely nothing during this entire episode besides get saved by V, which is how it's revealed that she's alive. And that's basically it. Actually, now that I really think about it, neither of them really do anything in the entire show. Lizzie did let V inside the hideout in episode 3, and Thad gave Uzi back her railgun in episode 2, but that's literally all they did. I genuinely think it would have been so much better if the show killed these two off because besides those 2 scenes, they're just comedic relief characters and don't do much plot-wise, so it makes absolutely no sense why these 2 survive and Doll dies. Not saying that Doll is even a remotely similar type of character to Thad or Lizzie, but I personally think that the deaths of these 2 could have been utilized to elevate the story. If Thad died in episode 2, that would have been a death that Uzi would have had to process alongside having to deal with with her relationship with Khan. Sure, it's not like Thad and Uzi were particularly close, but that would have added to the complexity of dealing with his death. It could have been another thing making her feel guilty alongside pushing N away, or a completely separate feeling of not exactly mourning someone but missing their presence. If Lizzie had been killed in episode 4 by Uzi during her campground massacre, I feel as if that would have been a really great opportunity to flesh out V's character, as while she doesn't particularly like workers, Lizzie was an exception besides Uzi later on in the story, so her having to witness Lizzie's death, which was caused by Uzi, who at this point in the show she was sort of starting to like, would have been such an effective internal conflict for her, especially if she continued to cover for her at the end of the episode. But none of that happens because these characters were allowed to live and do nothing. Speaking of doing nothing, let's talk about the biggest fraud in the entire fucking show, Jay. Now, I would be lying if I said she doesn't do anything in the show, because she does two things, and that's getting her ass beat and being ignored all the time, which doesn't change in the finale, and that pisses me off so much because this was literally the one episode where she could have done something and she doesn't. Sure, Jay does have a pretty cool fight with V, but it quite literally ruined her as a character. A large part of Jay's personality is that she acts like a corporate lapdog who only listens to her boss, that being Tessa, which makes sense since she's seen arriving with her on Copper 9 as she returns from the dead, is her partner in crime in episode 5, and is basically seen alongside her in almost every single scene they're both in together, minus Tessa pushing her away at the start of episode 6 to do fuck all, but whatever. But in episode 8, that is quite literally all thrown away. She knew that she had been working with Sin the entire time and that Tessa was dead, which, although that doesn't entirely ruin her character since it would make sense for her to be obedient to the absolute solver, what did ruin her character is this moment.
You know there's no escape, even in death! I promise it's better on the winning team. As a team.
This right here, the reason that she decided to work with Sin and betray both N and V is because she wanted to be on the winning team. Are you fucking serious? With this singular line, she basically says, I don't care about Tessa, when that was practically so much of what made her as a character. She doesn't want to avenge her death, she just cares about herself, and that is so fucking lame. And do you know what makes this even worse? She still doesn't do shit after this reveal. But before I get into that, let me talk about the hallway scene. Now, I don't particularly have an issue with N and Uzi here, as this is just a sweet moment between the two in a scary situation. What I do have an issue with here is when V shows up and N yells out to her it's a trap, which if you think about it for more than 2 seconds, makes no sense why he did that. To both N and Uzi's knowledge at the time of this scene, V died right in front of them at the end of episode 6, which Sin knows as well because she also witnessed it. N and Uzi have seen the Solver's ability to not only use holograms to create fake scenes, but to mimic voices as well, which Uzi literally points out that it's probably a trap, but they should have both assumed it was a trap in the first place. This decision makes no sense. It could have made sense if out of the corner of his eye, N sees V approaching the fake hologram of himself, to which he then calls out to V that it's a trap, but he doesn't because his episode's pacing is so fucking fast. Anyways, let me shit talk Jay again. In typical Jay fashion, during the final epic fight scene, she also does absolutely nothing in it, which you'd think she would actually put up a fight considering her huge reveal that she doesn't care about Tessa and just wants to be on the winning side. She puts in no effort to actually make her side the winning one. All she does in this fight is dodge Uzi's initial railgun shot, which cuts off one of her pigtails, eats that railgun to the face, which takes her out for 22 entire seconds, when she could have gone back up easily and helped Sin fight Uzi, but instead accidentally gets her head cut off by Sin when she throws her sword, allowing for Uzi to grab back her railgun and home run her head. And the one fucking chance she has to actually do something, anything, she gets blocked by V and N, to which V blasts a rocket into her torso and she falls down a hole, which by the way is her last fucking appearance in the entire show besides the credits. This fight was a 1v3, not even in disguise, because Jay was just that useless. She was done insanely dirty during the entire show, but this fight was like the cake on top of a cherry. It sucks that she's a fraud because she could have actually done something, but it's almost as if the show fucking hates her existence, because she has so little plot relevance. If she straight up didn't exist, the show would have been the same besides episode 2, but even then, that was more so the absolute solver's work than Jay. Other than Jay doing almost nothing interesting during the fight scene, I really don't have any other complaints besides for how it ends. I'm not against Uzi having predicted predicted where Sin would teleport and grabbing her heart, but it just felt so lazy to me. There's essentially no build up to her predicting the move, and it's simply out of pure luck she did so. I think it would have been better if she started attacking Uzi from all different sides, teleporting over and over and over, which then would have made sense for Uzi to predict where she would teleport next. An example from a different animated show, Invincible, does a scene like this perfectly, where Omni-Man is attacked by Red Rush from different sides and is then successfully able to predict and react to his next move and kill him. This really is just a nitpick compared to everything else, however, and I don't mind this at all, but what I do mind is how Sin actually dies. Uzi eating Sin's black hole conscious thing makes absolutely zero sense if you didn't hyperanalyze the show, which I'm guessing most of the people who watched didn't do. And even if you did, this is just such a small detail that isn't clear to the viewer at all when it happens originally, and it only happens before once in episode 2, which by that point, you would have probably forgotten that Jay conscious scene happened in the first place. If anything, this scene comes off as more of a joke solution that just somehow works, which it is to an extent. Almost 3 years in the making with 8 episodes that have a combined total of over 360 million views and a runtime of 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 10 seconds. The payoff to this show is a fucking joke. I think you can see why I titled this video the way I did. This ending left me so disappointed, not because of how short it was or because I thought some story elements were questionable. It's because it didn't feel like a finale. After the fight is completely done with, there's only around 3.5 minutes, with 2 of those being direct after fight scenes, and only 30 seconds of an actual conclusion with a minute of credits, which by the way provides more of a conclusion than the actual animated one, but even then it still feels like there's so much missing. So many questions were left unanswered. What were the corpse spires for? Did all of humanity actually get wiped from the universe, or are there still planets that contain them? Which disassembly drone was the one that killed Nori? Where did V kill Doll's parents? Because if it was inside the hideout, how did she get inside when N's break-in marked the first time they got through the doors? Why don't we see other disassembly drones besides N, V, and J? Did all of them really get killed by the Sentinels? Before the explosion of Earth, how did the Absolute Solver prepare to invade Copper-9 and the other planets? Where the fuck is J going if all the other planets nearby are gone? How did V find out that J was betraying her and N? Why did Solver power shatter mirrors? What was the explanation for the Absolute Solver creating organic fleshy matter? Why is Khan still a fucking bum piece of shit? I'm not saying all of these had to be answered in this episode, because it is okay to leave some things up to interpretation, and quite frankly some of these should have been answered before. But at the same time, it's a finale for the entire show. If you're not gonna have a season 2, then you should wrap up all loose ends instead of making more and then having your fan base try and make sense of it, or make the answers to those details so hidden a majority of the fan base doesn't even know about it. An occurrence of this exact scenario that is really notable to me is the answer as to why the oil cooldown plot point was put aside. And to most people, they just see this as a simple plot hole, which it essentially is, but if you are to look deeper, it was actually answered almost 3 fucking years ago. During the annual Glitch X livestream in 2023, Kevin and Luke, the creators of Glitch, and Liam Vickers would host a Q&A relating to anything about murder drones, where anyone could ask anything in the chat and have a chance for it to be answered by the big man himself, which is where it was revealed that the entire oil plot point was never really revisited due to practicality and power scaling reasons, and was instead more confined to being a background problem. And you know what? That's a completely fair reason. But by the time this live stream had taken place, 6 of the 8 episodes of the show were already released, 2 of them still having references to this specific plot point. One of them actually had this be a major plot point in the episode, cabin fever. Uzi literally becomes a murder drone in this episode. She is bloodthirsty for oil. This is another case of just bad writing in this show, because even if you wanted this to be more of a background plot point, you could have had some jokes that actually fit with it. An example of one I thought of is every time a disassembly drone sees a corpse, they immediately start to dig in like a rabid dog. Like, I don't know, I think it would have been funny to see N or V just start licking puddles of oil on the floor, and that would have kept that plot point alive even if it was mostly a joke. Although it does contradict with what the corpse spires are for. Wait, what? Back when Murder Drones was still relatively new and had just released their season 1 teaser, at the same time, Glitch announced that it would be doing an early screening of episode 2 on November 12th and 13th, 2022 in Los Angeles and Berkeley, California, 5 to 6 days before the episode would release on YouTube. Besides just being an early screening, it would also host a Q&A at the end with Liam Vickers, in which the same day it was screened in LA, someone by the name of Hell of a High who attended the screening would post the full audio of it onto YouTube. And this is where we get our answer.
How are N and V staying alive without overheating, since they don't seem to be consuming consuming any oil right now?
A very good question, Liam.
Yeah.
I ask this all the time.
Yeah, they keep getting on my case about that one. It's almost like I set up a precedent and then didn't follow through. We assume there's some off-screen, probably like. I mean, they do live in a giant corpse fire, so you know they got rations. Is my current thought.
Now, although this is undoubtedly an answer, it really feels like a cop-out answer that sure, it makes sense, but is also disappointing. There had to have been a reason for these spires other than oil rationing and I don't know, displaying them like a fucking North Korean soldier does his medals, because there's such an emphasis put on it. There's such an emphasis put on so many things in this show that ultimately go nowhere or are simply forgotten. Ooh, you see, now I've been able to link this tangent back to my main point. Murder Drones makes things so unnecessarily confusing, and even when you understand most of the show, it pisses you off because you now see the problems and how this show could have been easily fixed to be more comprehensive. I get that this is an indie studio and Glitch, especially at this time, didn't have as many resources they do now, and indie studios will always be behind compared to giant Hollywood corporations, but problems are problems nonetheless. To recap, the coherence / understanding of this show is horrible at a first glance and still very confusing to even most fans, with certain important details being missed very easily, and that's made even worse with occasional deceptive signaling. Plot holes everywhere that are almost never filled in and simply ignored. The show has horrible consistency when it comes to its tone, and it only negatively affects the story that is being told. And having lost so much potential because of its insanely short runtime that feels like we are only seeing half of the episodes that were released. And everything about it just frustrates me to my core. So why is it that I still love this show? There's something about Murder Drones that brings me a lot of comfort in a way that I can't pinpoint specifically, but I think it's because it honestly just reminds me of something that I would have loved to watch when I was younger. I never really had a piece of media that I was extremely attached to when I was a kid, besides maybe a couple of video games, but when it came to cartoons, it was never really the same for me. Like, sure, I watched a lot of SpongeBob and various Cartoon Network shows, but I really wasn't emotionally invested in them. And that might be on the account that I just really didn't pay attention and was a propeller-wearing baby who loves their swirly lollipops, but it's also because I didn't really know who I was as a person yet. To this day, I still struggle with self-esteem issues and figuring out who I really am as a person, and as stupid as it sounds, Murder Drones was a tremendous help to me discovering my identity and loving who I am as a person. Sure, the show isn't perfect at all, far from it. Were you even paying attention to this video? But honestly, I think that adds to its overall charm. The show truly embodies that 2000s cringe culture that so many people want to forget about and embraces it. And yeah, I know I heavily critique this show for its humor, but I really do have to applaud it for not standing down and just owning it, even if it does sometimes feel a bit forced. Uzi is a character that I heavily relate and look up to, which is embarrassing to admit, but it's true. She's angsty, insecure, and quite lonely sometimes, but even then she still finds a way to push through all of the shitty circumstances she's been dealt, and I find that so inspiring and commendable. It makes me want to be like that. And it's not just the show itself, but the fandom as well. At the time I'm writing this script, in 5 months it'll have been 2 years since the show ended, and to this day fans of Murder Drones are still going strong. On both TikTok and Twitter, I still constantly see animation memes, cosplays, artwork, OCs, discussions and takes about the show, both good and bad, that just absolutely blow my mind, and it's honestly inspiring to see so many people still be passionate for this show. Hell, fans have taken it upon themselves to make their own spin-off episodes and films, and that's just fucking awesome. Even after the finale, it's great to see that Glitch also still cares about the show, although it would be kind of silly to expect him not to. It was their first big hit in the indie animation space, and they still do produce new content, with a music video that contains a score done by the living Tombstone of all people, a graphic novel series in the works, and of course, more merchandise. As much as it isn't as often as most people like, it's still amazing they do these things for fans of the show. According to Gooseworks, creator of The Amazing Digital Circus, Glitch's by far most popular show, she claims that Glitch allowed for both her and Liam to decide how long the episodes are and when their show ends, stating that Murder Drones was never quote-unquote cancelled because of The Amazing Digital Circus. It ended because Liam simply felt like he finished the story. While you could definitely make arguments about whether or not you think that's true, in the end it really doesn't matter because Liam himself feels satisfied to have ended off on that note, and I'll respect that decision. Whatever he's up to now, I hope Liam nothing but success, and if he ever comes back to announce something as little as an interest he has or as big as a new animation project, you bet your ass I'll be there to support him day one. And on the very off chance that Liam is watching this video, which I sincerely doubt, but hey, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, thank you you so much for creating this show that, while I did rag on it pretty hard, gave me hope. It gave me hope that something like this show inspires others to create things similar to it. It gave me hope at a time where I honestly had very little, and while it would be sort of dramatic to say that this show is the sole reason for it, you made something that kept me going at times where I didn't want to. In a world where it feels like the amount of hatred and vitriol being spread around is increasing every single day, it's very easy to lose onto that hope. It's so easy to shroud yourself in darkness and not want to ever pick yourself up from the ground that you've been kicked to time and time again. It's easy to simply stop living. But in those times of uncertainty and melancholy, you find things that keep you going. And as embarrassing as it is to say, actually, you know what? Fuck that! I'm not embarrassed to say this at all. Murder Drones motivated me to keep moving on with life no matter how much bullshit it threw at me, and I'll say that with my entire fucking chest. Fuck you if you think that's lame or cringe, because quite frankly, I don't care. I mean, shit, as an emo purple-haired drone girl named after a submachine gun once said in a finale that I didn't quite like but also still enjoyed at the same time, I think dumb things are freaking cool, and I am free.
Hey, you know I said Bite Me sounds like a song that could be used in Modern Warfare 2 montage?
What the fuck was that? I know there are probably a few questions you have right now, and I'll get into answering those, but first I want to say that there is a chance that I just had to cut out what I just played from this video due to copyright, so if it was, there's a link in the description to what I made as a special little ending for this video, which is a Modern Warfare 2 montage to the song Bite Me from the show. And here's where I'll start answering questions I think you guys have. First of all, why the fuck did you make this? And to answer that simply, because I thought it'd be cool. Like I said before, I always thought Bite Me sounded like a song that would be used in Modern Warfare 2 montages if it came out back then, so I decided, why the hell not make one? When I was first starting to write the script for this video, I already knew I was going to have a montage at the end using the song, and I actually ended up finding out later that coincidentally, Liam Vickers himself played Modern Warfare 2 back then, so that was also funny. Speaking of which, I want to talk about the montage itself before I move on to other things. I did play the game using the IW4X client, since if you actually try and play this game without using it, you will literally get your PC hacked by cheaters because of the security vulnerabilities that have not been patched for years. So yeah, but on the bright side, since I was using a modded client, I was also able to use mods for getting cinematic shots and playing bot games, which, yeah, most of the clips here are bots if you couldn't tell. And if you have a keen eye, through the VHS filter, you can see that all of the names here are references to the show. Here's the full list of names I used. Try and guess what each one is a reference to. I wanted to try and get these clips legitimately, but holy fuck, that was just not possible. Older Call of Duty titles such as Modern Warfare 2 have such small player counts that most of the time, you're going to be going against these same people over and over and over. And some of these guys have been playing the game for literal years, so I was just getting steamrolled constantly. And I'm gonna be so honest with you guys, I was just trying to get clips here. I was not gonna deal with that shit, so I just went with the route of playing with actual bot lobbies, which, to be fair, are a lot of modern COD edits you use bots and shit, so hey, this is fair game. And even while using bots, some of the clips I went for took ages to hit, specifically the trick shots. I think the only clips I got that were with real players were in the beginning with the ACR, MP5, and the intervention clips on subbase. I'm also aware that the editing in the montage is not exactly the best when it comes to modern COD edits, and one of the main factors in that is that I decided to edit the entire thing in 60 FPS to match the actual video's frame rate instead of 24, which is the frame rate that most COD edits actually use. I also edited the montage in After Effects, and this is like only the second thing I've ever made in After Effects besides a really simple edit of The Amazing Digital Circus. So if there are any actual COD editors out there that were watching and thought, wow, this fucking sucks, I kind of agree, but also give me some slack. I'll try and improve, but at the same time, holy shit, using some of these tools to make Modern Warfare 2 edits fucking suck because they genuinely feel archaic. So I don't know if I'll ever make one of these again, but if I do, I'm probably just gonna download other people's demos and use those. Despite the struggle on learning how to use these new tools though, I will say it was really fun to make this and I don't regret it at all. Video game montages, and more specifically COD in general, are genuinely such a cool art form, and it kind of sucks that most people don't view them as such, because there are some amazing edits that have little to no traction because of how niche the space is, but I hope I was able to somewhat give you guys a taste of that niche. Also, if you're wondering, the theme I want to go for with the montage is something that I thought Uzi herself would make during the early days of COD edits, which is mostly due to my editing skill, or I guess lack thereof, but I hope I got that across. Lowkey headcanoned her to be a COD player and editor. Anyways, enough Call of Duty talk. Murder drones, am I right? I hope you guys really enjoyed my sort of recap, analysis, and criticism on this show, and I am I'm so fucking sorry this took ages for it to come out. I got severely demotivated out of nowhere, and that affected me a lot during the making of this video. But hey, we pushed through it, and now it's finally out. And before you ask, no, I don't hate the show. Obviously, it isn't perfect at all, and there are some things I really dislike about it, but I mean, are you truly a fan of something if you can't see the flaws in it? Seriously though, in the end, I'm so grateful for this show's existence and love it so much. Shit, I don't even think I could afford to hate it. I have spent way too fucking much on merch. Like I said before, I invite all of you to discuss either the show or the points I have made in the comments below in a civil manner. I'm always open to discuss my interests, especially if I'm able to gain a new perspective, even if I don't agree with it. Hell, you might be able to change my mind on some of the topics I discussed in this video, but we'll see about that. This is also a pretty different video compared to everything else on my channel, as I usually cover horror video games, more specifically FNAF, but I had a ton of fun making this one, and if you guys want to see more like it, I'm totally down to look into more indie animation and just broaden the topics I discuss in general. Of course, that doesn't mean I'll forget about FNAF. In fact, I already got a few ideas cooking up in my noggin for some FNAF related videos. One last thing before I go, channel update. I'm gonna try and get some videos out as soon as I can and, you know, try and stick with some shorter ones for the time being, but I do want to announce that I'm going to be going to college soon, so my schedule may be slowed down due to that. However, I will still be working on videos, and if you want any updates on what I may be covering next or updates on said videos, I provide a lot of updates on my community page and occasionally on my Twitter, but that's more so for personal stuff, which you should still follow me there by the way if you're interested, as I also post actual video work in progresses since I can on the community page. Either way, I really hope you enjoyed this gargantuan video, and if you haven't already, go ahead and like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you loved it, and just tell me what you liked, disliked, or something else I should make a video on in the comments below. But I think my time is finally up. I'm gonna go listen to some Nightcore while keeping my emo robot feelings to myself. I'll be on my way now. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe everyone, and see ya! So Liam, if you ever think about writing a season 2, I got some ideas, hit me up.